Few little things. I just reminded that Paul did actually receive an award after our last meeting. I mean, he had contacted us. Anyhow, congratulations to Paul. Very well done. I had actually made contact with him and said well deserved, but anyhow, that's good, and we're glad to see he's here today because he'd been on jury duty and they just let him off in time to come to the meeting. We've got what apologies have we got, Vicky? We had Jane Horton has apologized but resigned. Anybody else?
Just Fran Carpenter.
Right, okay. She had another meeting and just might join in later, I think. Anyhow, fine. The minutes of the last meeting then, that you all sent those after the meeting, and Vicky presumably had no comments and she's put them up onto the website. So we just accept those as they are. And I don't think there are any specific actions from that. We didn't note any, did we, Vicky?
No, Ruth, that's fine.
So that's fine. So we just accept those. Then we move on to my reports, and I did put out the freshwater when the river wetlands forum minutes. That was quite an interesting meeting. There was some money found by Natural England for 1 or 2 months of footprint ecology, someone we've come across before, to actually do some work. Anyhow, it is limited money and HLS money might be there for a year. So I think this is an ongoing situation and there will be a question really as to how much money, the long the money goes on and what can be done during the time, but we'll hear more about it, no doubt. So that was footprint ecology. The recreation. Right. Are we going to sort out what it's looking like, the screen?
Peter, you're just sharing your screen. Can you stop sharing your screen, please? You just need to click on the button at the top that says screen sharing.
No, he hasn't managed it.
So Peter, next to the leave button, there's a little arrow that points up and it says share content. You just need to stop sharing. Or if not, maybe come out of the meeting and come back in. We'll wait for you. Okay, you should just come back in, Ruth.
Yes, okay. So you had the information about footprint ecology, and I think we just wait developments there. They've got a very limited amount of time and the funding for it is limited, but anyhow, things are happening. The other thing was the RMS, and I suggested you actually looked at the minutes of that. Now, most of what was discussed at the RMS is going to come up again on this agenda because lots of time on cycling. No, it's still not right, is it? This.
I think Peter needed to mute.
Yeah,
I've muted. Done that now.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So that was my.
Sorry, am I still causing a problem?
I think can you put yourself on mute, please, Peter?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think that's sorted it, Ruth.
Okay, well, good. So I think we can probably leave my report at that point. I did put out another one, but I do it under additional reports on Wiltshire. Okay, so it's over to Adam then.
Adam, before you start, Henry's got a question. He's got his hand raised.
Yeah, I've got my hand raised, but I don't have a question. I pressed the hand raised and to agree to the minutes, which was a silly thing to do, and and I can't get rid of it.
Okay, I'll try and do that for you.
Can you do that for me, Vicky? Thank you.
Okay, well, if anyone wants to know more about the freshwater issue and RMS, the minutes are available on the National Park website for you to look at. So over to Adam.
Thank you, Ruth. I've got a few updates. Arguably the most important for the forum is a lot of our members have come to the end of your 3-year terms. So pretty much everyone, but our newest members, so Julian, Richard Shirley and Richard Manley, everyone else, we thank you very much for your time these past 3 years. It's been fantastic. Thank you. I know that COVID has sort of limited us slightly recently. So we are going to be recruiting for the majority of positions on the forum. I'm sure many of you are used to this process. There's no limit on the number of times people can serve in the forum. So if you'd like to reapply for your positions, then myself and Vicky are working on the recruitment side of things, putting a few adverts out. All the information is on our website now, so it's ready to go live. So I would advise people to have a look at that. And we've updated the form slightly, just to make it easier for us to sort of score people's criteria and things like that. So pretty much the same, slightly different. So feel free to have a look. But we hope to be recruiting until April, and then we will have some new people on the forum for the June meeting. That is the current plan. So as Ruth said, sadly we will lose Jane. I'm not sure if Jane is here today. Alistair Duncan is also leaving us. Alistair's been with us for a long time. Over 10 years, I think. So he's got a lot of experience. So we're sad to lose him, and there will be a couple of others potentially who will be leaving the forum. So myself and Vicky and Ruth and Anne would like to thank everyone for their hard work and for serving their terms for 3 years. And please do reapply for membership of the forum. We think you do a fantastic job, but there might be a few new faces we see at the next meeting. So that's that.
Do you want everyone to fill in the new form? I mean,
yes, please. So we'll be taking do fill it in to the best of your abilities, because if someone else puts in a better application, then we will be accepting them. You know, it's a fair and transparent process. So please fill in the form to your best abilities. But we will be kind of advertising widely. So yes, please do. Certainly do apply if you want to. If you wish to keep on the forum, then please do reapply for your post, and please do take it seriously, because there will be other people applying for similar positions as well. Is there any questions? I'll sort of stop there and just to field any questions potentially on that, because that's a bit of a biggie, I guess. The rest of it is just sort of updates on existing. Is that
Paul Brockman has got a question?
Hi. I can't remember. Have I got to reapply as well?
That's right, Paul. Yeah,
Yep,
it's
no
yeah, that's right. If you go onto our website and
Yeah.
we can send around a link on the website, then there's a recruitment. Ooh, is someone sharing their screen again?
I can't see who it is.
Who is sharing their screen? It's the middle button.
Oh, it's Peter. Peter.
Uh,
So, Peter, if you can come out and come back in again, please.
Again, I don't know what's happening here. It's got a mind of its own.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, Paul. Yes, so the all the information's on the website. There's a sort of membership pack which sort of details what it's like to be a member of the Access Forum. Hopefully, many people will know that already, but feel free to have a look at it to refresh your memories. And then the other one is a recruitment form. So please, that's a Word document. So please fill that in and then email it to the access.forum at newforestmpa.gov.uk.
Okay, many thanks.
No worries, Paul. And any other questions on that?
No further questions.
Okay, brilliant. That is pretty much it. The coast path, we're hoping that will be approved. The CCG, the Calshot Gosport section, little short 2-mile section by March. So by the end of the month, we're hoping to have approval on that. And the estimate for approval for the longer section, Highcliffe to Calshot, is 2022. I see Anne's got a hand up, Anne. Do you have a question on that or the previous?
Yes, I have. I understand that we still got problems at Barton-on-Sea, that the path has to be moved inland. How far has that got? Do you know?
I don't know, actually. That's outside the national park, so that would probably be Hampshire County Council, still within the remit of this Access Forum.
Yeah.
Good that you asked it. The short answer is I don't know. I saw that Alison Perry is here, so Alison might know more than me on this section. I'll briefly hand over to Alison.
So the plan is, so I believe the landowner has a path in place at the moment. We've renegotiated moving that path back, but essentially we're just waiting on the coast path to come through, as Adam said, with that Highcliffe to Calshot section, which will formalise the access and then formalise that rollback essentially. What is more than, we've way lost the definitive right of way there. It went probably 20 meters ago, so I don't know how long ago that was. So it's unlikely that the right of way will be re-established. It will just be the coast path going through there.
Can I follow up with a because obviously the coast along there can be quite dangerous, and I'm thinking coming up to the summertime, will we be putting signs up from the health and safety point of view? Because that's the other thing, obviously, that with a collapsing coastline. Thank you.
Hampshire have never done that in the past. It was always New Forest District Council who did that, because they were taking the lead on that rollback with the landowner. Essentially, because it's a permissive path, the responsibility rests with the landowner. So we'll see how things go, I think, and kind of take it as things go. At the moment, I think the worst section, you'll actually go behind the fence now. There's actually a fence in the way. But people do what they do, don't they? And I know there's one of those bunnies where people go down to the shoreline there, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, I think we'll kind of take it as it comes and see what happens, really.
Right, that's okay, Anne. So back to Adam, yes?
Yeah, thanks for that, Alison. Much obliged. So yes, we're hoping to get the Highcliffe to Calshot section in 2022. What else have I mentioned? Pedal. So I thought I'd give a shout out to Pedal. We've got 3 more years of funding. So Pedal is the New Forest Inclusive Cycling Scheme. They've been doing such a great job. The Heritage Lottery have given them 3 years more funding, and actually I was thinking, to be checked with Anne or Ruth, given that it is an accessibility project, maybe we could go and have a visit when we're allowed to, maybe this year or next year, that could be a nice thing. But they do really good work on inclusive cycling in the New Forest. So I thought I'd update on that. There is still the 2026 deadline for claiming rights of way. That's still set on January the 1st, 2026, and I put a little link in my report so you can see which rights of way are being claimed across the New Forest. There have been several claimed on the Crown lands, going across the Crown lands. Now there is a thing called Crown exemption, which means that Crown lands are exempt from the standard routes to claim rights of way through the Highways Act. You can still claim them, but you've got to use common law, which is much more difficult. I don't know the intricacies of claiming a footpath on common law, but there is a link in my report, so you can have a look at that. That is a list of all that have been put in for claims. Alison and her team deal with this more than I do. I don't even touch it. So that is the information on the website is a list of all the paths that have been requested. That list will drop down as evidence is looked into, and there's a long waiting period on that as well. I think that's it, other than to say we've got some signs in at the Leap Loop. So we've got some lovely signs in designed with Alison and her team, and we've chucked them in on the Leap Loop, and I think they look great. And we'll be getting more signs like this on the Coast Path and in a couple of other promoted routes as and when that happens. So I think that's me, Ruth.
Okay, well, thank you. Now my additional report on the Wiltshire CAF does sort of go on from that. They were expressing extreme concern about the 2026 cut-off date, and they are still writing letters, as are Hampshire CAF, I believe, trying to get some changes in that cut-off date. And there is also the possibility of the Act being implemented that makes it easier to deal with map modification orders. I don't know if Alison knows any more about that. There's no action as far as I can see.
Nothing that I know of as such. I'm actually going to HCAF tomorrow as well, so I don't know if they'll talk about it. But yeah, I haven't heard anything. There's nothing been coming through about any changes to the legislation or what have you as yet. So
because it's been going on for 4 or 5 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Well,
Ruth, we've got a question from Gordon when you've got a second.
Yes. All right, Gordon.
Yeah, sorry, just going back to Adam's point about the signage on the Leap Loop. I presume it's okay for me to actually walk around there. Can I drive down to Leap and start walking around there? Am I permitted to do that?
How do you mean, Gordon?
Well, I just a bit wary of driving anywhere for being pulled over for going out of my spot, my home, and so I'll get around to walk it, because I did raise some issues about the signage on the Leap Loop last year. The year before that probably. And yeah, so I just feel it's my duty to go back and see if everything's been addressed as we discussed at the time. So yeah, okay.
I think it's your decision to decide whether you're within the COVID rules or no, and how far you are from home. But you're still within Hampshire, which
I didn't really expect formal permission to do it, but I just thought so if I don't do it for a few weeks, then that's probably the reason.
Well,
okay,
no,
yeah, I'll get on.
they're walking it for a bit, are they? Not in any great numbers, at any rate.
Well, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people walking in a lot of places I wouldn't have expected to see a lot of people. So anyway.
There are, but they're tending to do short walks, probably not the Leap Loop, which might be a bit damp at the moment anyhow.
It may well be.
So to go on to the Wiltshire CAF, they were concerned about the 2026 cut-off date. And obviously you do have to modify the map, but if things get put on, and they're concerned about the number of cases they have actually got waiting to be modified. 198 in the BHS, probably putting in at least another 50. They've warned them. Huge numbers. They've got 3 people working on it. It will take them absolutely yonks. So I can understand why they are trying to make some alterations. They do accept if you lodge a claim, it's there, but it might be there for, I don't know, 20 years, I think, the way with the numbers they've actually got. The other thing with Wiltshire Cafe is that they had actually had problems with their CAF before. Somebody actually put in a complaint about them, and with the result, some people, were causing trouble. And there were some resignations due to ill health. Anyhow, they've now reformed the CAF, and they have actually got 11 new members. So they've gone through the recruitment process. They're also extremely concerned with the rural crime people, and it, I think, is partly farmers and partly hair coursers driving 4-wheel drives on footpaths. Well, I don't think it would be possible to take a 4-wheel drive on many of our footpaths, but they are likely to call in the rural crime police. Their county councillor suggested that, but I doubt that they've got much time to deal with footpaths. But anyhow, that was quite interesting. So I did also attend the HCAF one, and they were recruiting new members as well. And I don't think I've got anything more to say about that. I don't know whether Alison's got a report, verbal report. Alison, she's got her hand up anyhow.
And no, I was just going to say that the waiting time on DMMO claims in Hampshire is about 7 years, depending on we have a priority system, so it kind of, but I think we probably have about the same number as in Wiltshire. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. I'd have to check with Harry. But yeah, so we're about 7 years if it's just the bog standard. There are different priorities if things are going to be built on by a development or something, it goes up the priority system, etc. But yeah, I think that's pretty standard, and we have 3 officers working on DMMO claims, so yeah.
It's a huge workload for all the counties, isn't it? So the sooner they change the regulations,
Yeah.
Wiltshire certainly have a priority as well, and they were looking to see if they perhaps should change the way they prioritise them to push a few more through more quickly. And some are more significant, like all the building, which they've got far more than we have. Because it is Wiltshire and Swindon have the most enormous number of developments. Do you have any other things to report, Alison?
No, I apologise. Other than apologising for not doing a report this time, I've just been absolutely crammed with lots of people walking everywhere and complaining about muddy paths. So I think that is basically the situation we're in, which I'm sure most of the country are in, is unlike normal winters, people who don't really who are fair weather walkers haven't been going out previously, whereas this winter they've been going out. So we've had lots and lots of complaints about muddy paths, and so there's an expectation situation going there. We are just waiting for approval of some capital funding from our department, possibly to undertake what they're calling a path recovery fund, whereby parts of our paths and country parks and things, if they have been particularly affected by an increase in use because of COVID, and they are particularly affected because they're very muddy because of the wet weather we've been having, then we potentially have some funding to do some work. So I know there's some bits and pieces gone forward for Leap, Country Park. I have put some things forward for some paths in the New Forest, but I don't know where they fit on the priority list. So we're just waiting for Councillor Heron to approve that, if he's going to approve that. But that's quite a significant amount of money, so we should see it. But that's basically what it's been the last 3 months, is lots and lots of people using the network, which is great, but lots and lots of people complaining about things and dog walking and things like that. So
yes, I can appreciate that. I mean, there are certainly many, many people out, and I can vouch for the muddy paths, but I haven't got right. But in Fordingbridge, for instance, there are masses of people out looking at the housing developments and getting very worried about what might be happening with footpaths.
yeah.
Which I'm sure you've got your eye on that.
Yes, we are involved in the ones at Fordingbridge. So yes,
But there are so many people looking. They'll be putting in.
There is a plan, and there was a request made to New Forest District Council about the trailway bit from the first section, the old railway line, to link to the Hampshire section of the Bremer railway line. So there is a plan for that, but I don't know where we are at the moment with that. It's just kind of rumbling on and things. So.
The developers are very much involved in what's going on anyhow, but some planning permissions have now gone in, so you'll probably hear more. Right, so I think if that's all from Alison. We had another report.
Sorry to interrupt. Peter Scott's got a question.
Yes, Peter, what's your question?
Yeah, just to confirm absolutely that this lost ways, as long as they're registered before 2026, they can be put on a definitive map to infinity.
That's the belief now, Peter. But who knows what the government might do in the future. But our understanding is once they're lodged, they're not lost.
Thank you very much for confirming that.
Okay, well, we did have a report from Forestry England. Gary put quite a long report, and like Alison, he's talking about the pressure on the forest and roots and things. I don't know whether Gary wants to add anything. He was talking about seasonal rangers. And Gary, do you want to say anything more? You put a good report together, so you made, everyone should have read it.
I mean, I suppose it was just building on the stuff that Sam Jones was talking about at the December meeting, and it's more prevalent now because we're sort of coming up to Easter period, so it's sort of getting those ducks in rows really. But I mean, happy to take questions if there's any questions.
Anne Sevier's got her hand up. Have you, Anne?
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. I'll take my hand down while I remember. Otherwise, you'll think I'm putting my hand up all the time, like I do normally. I just wanted to raise the fact that it's really nice to see people out on the forest enjoying themselves, and the majority are fantastically well behaved. But we do have a lot of people who are new dog owners. And I think there is a bit of a concern because it will be coming up soon to when all the foals are born. And I think the signage that was put up by the CDA is a great help, because we haven't had people actually been injured this last year by doing the silly things. So I just wonder how high up your priority list it is to actually keep the signs up, and also to make sure that the dogs aren't on your ground nesting bird areas, and also chasing the deer, and also for the point of view of the foals that are coming, and the cattle will be out again, of course, in end of April, May. So have the FE given any thought to, from the health and safety aspect on the forest? Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. So the so in terms of the CDA signage, there was the application for that signage was for them to be out for a year, and then it was going to be reviewed, and it's, as I understand, it's being reviewed currently. The CDA have applied for an extension for that signage to be out again this summer, which I think, you know, we're supportive of. I think that there was more issues about how it was displayed, I suppose, around the forest, and I think we're just trying to iron out some of those issues. Is that fair enough? I think that's probably a fair enough thing to say and leave it there.
Yes, it's just that the rumour around is that because it is a health and safety, it's good for everybody that the signs are up, and there's just a bit of feeling that there was a bit of procrastination from the FE. But if that's not the case, then that is absolutely fantastic. Do let the CDA know that you're not procrastinating. That would be absolutely great, because it doesn't just help with the fact with the livestock, it also means that people do keep their dogs better under control. Anyway, thank you. I just said I'm thinking from the overall point, not only do you want dogs, it's always the minority. We always know it's the minority, but the minority can do so much damage with uncontrollable dogs. You've got horse riders and you've got cyclists on the cycle paths, and you've got children walking, and it's nice if everybody just sort of shared the space sensibly. And I'm not knocking all dog owners, but there's a lot of new dog owners who perhaps don't really realise their dog has great fun chasing things. I remember I caught somebody in Slowden last year on cycling with a child and 3 loose dogs, and as I was passing, the dogs took off after some deer. So it happens, but it's just a question of education. We all know. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, I think Anne, the biggest concern was around, I suppose, not so much around the signage, but I suppose how it was where and how it was put out, and I think there just needs to be a little bit more thought into the sort of appropriateness of that, and ensuring it's sort of smart and tidy, and you know, it's not just another sign, you know, that's detracting from the message, I guess.
Gary, you've got a question from Heather.
Heather, come on.
Yes, really just a quickie to back up what Anne was saying. We do have huge concern about when lockdown ends, because so many people have been getting puppies that have never had dogs before, don't know what to do with them, aren't trained, and we do have a great concern about how this is going to affect dog walking and dog walking reputations on the forest. So we are working quite closely. We're even talking about putting some of our staff out, people out with the rangers to talk to dog walkers particularly in the bird nesting areas, which is a little different to the cattle and the livestock, I know. But you know, bad dog ownership, I'm afraid, is likely to increase over this summer. So we've just got to do absolutely everything we can to make people responsible and help go in that direction. Okay, thank you, that's all.
Right, thank you, Heather. I think absolutely all of us realise there are more and more people out, and it will be difficult to actually, I don't know if we should use the word police, but we do want to have good behaviour. We've got more rangers, more volunteer rangers, seasonal rangers, so we're going to have people, there's nothing for it. Okay, has anybody else got a report? No? Okay, well, item 6 was any other business, including public representations. I don't think there are any public representations. Vicky, are there?
I don't think so. Brian, did you want to say something? Brian Tarnoff, is he there?
I think he is there. Brian?
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to, although if it were possible, I wouldn't mind saying something during the cycling debate, just a very brief item concerning some correspondence we've had with Cycling UK that might be, if it turns out it's relevant. I wasn't planning on making any presentations today.
That's fine, Brian. No, we'll leave it until the cycling, because we are giving over a great deal of time for cycling. And I don't believe there was any other business from anyone. I was expecting Alistair Duncan to try and come on to this LAF meeting today, but he obviously hasn't at the moment. And Adam suggested I actually did buy a plant or flowers or something for him. I have got, maybe I'll show it to you now. If I can, so as you can see, it's an outside planter that can go near his window, and he can put the plants in the ground if necessary. I don't live more than about 6 miles from him, so I'll deliver it to his doorstep. Then I won't have to keep it in good order for any longer. But as Adam said, Alistair was the chairman for a long period of time and vice chairman before that. And it's just a thank you. And I have actually written a little card to go with it, in which I have actually said, with thanks for all that you have done for the New Forest Local Access Forum from all the staff and members of the LAF. It's just a little thank you. So I think that really was an AOB. So we then move on to the cycling and walking infrastructure plan and the LC whip. And yes, we've got Jim come up straight away. So Jim, we are thinking, I don't know how you're going to merge you and Richard, or if you are intending to this time, but we thought at some point we would have a 10-minute break where people could make themselves a coffee.
That sounds very good. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Ruth.
Yes, hi, over to you, Jim.
So as far as I understand it, there's 20 minutes allocated for this item, but I have a presentation of around 10-12 minutes. I'm happy then to hand back to questions now or questions later. So I'll share my screen and hopefully show this presentation.
We'll see what Richard thinks afterwards, whether he thinks he'd be appropriate to join in at this point to do things. Yes, after you've done your presentation.
Well, thank you, Ruth. The first thing I'd like to say is that showing correctly?
Yeah, I can see it.
Is that showing large, or is that showing small?
It's showing on the full screen, Jim. It's fine. All
right. Okay. Thanks. For some reason, it's not on mine. Okay. So I have a presentation. It's called the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. So I think it's important that we do these slightly separate because I know the discussion later on is predominantly around cycling, but I want to talk equally about cycling and walking in this presentation, because the LC whip, which is being prepared over the coming year, work has started at the very early stage of that, is something which is equally split really between walking and cycling. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. I have, as I said, about 10-12 slides, which I'll go through relatively quickly. There's more text on them obviously than you can read, but that is because I can then send the presentation out afterwards, which is what I've been doing with the different groups which I've presented to, which include parish and town quadrants and the RMS advisory group. So the first thing to say is it's a partnership approach. So I may be here speaking today, but what I'm telling you about is basically the joint work of the District Council, the County Council, Forestry England, and ourselves at the National Park Authority. My name's Jim Mitchell. I've met many of you, not all of you, I've worked at the National Park for over a decade now in various different roles and formats, but at the moment I'm leading a team looking at sustainable access, which includes Ainsley Clinton and the New Forest Tour and cycle working group, Adam Vasey, obviously, who you know very well, who's here today, and the Access Forum, and the Pedal project, among other things, which you know about as well. So what I will talk about is what an LC Whip is. You may be aware of it, you may not. How this fits with the wider work of the forest, and then it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on what Access Forum involvement you would like in the process. So what is just zooming in a bit, what is an LC Whip? So a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. They are something which the government came up with in 2017, so they're England-wide. They're basically all about a cohesive plan which allows for prioritising infrastructure development over a 10-year period. So the County Council will be the one leading on this. They're their lead partner. We're working there with the transport team, so Annie Tomlinson, Anne Stevens and Graham Wright. We've also been working on the footpaths, obviously, with Adam, with Alison and the Rights Away team. But the LC Whip is primarily being driven by the transport team, and it sets out this vision for walking and cycling, which will allow bidding into funding, which becomes available over time. So if you haven't really got one of these plans, then you're going to be at the back of the queue for any large infrastructure funds which become available. But we all know that funds are short, and they're likely to get in more short supply over the coming years as the pandemic finances need to be addressed. But we do think that there will be opportunities, both because we're in a protected landscape, but also Hampshire wide, to put in for funds once we have one of these infrastructure plans. Just shout if anything you can't see, or you can't see the screen. So for some reason it's a little bit strange on my screen today. So just to say what the direction from government is, they produced something last year called Gear Change, which is a cycling walking plan for England. I've got the links there. You can click the first link, and it's a kind of glossy document with lots of pictures and a forward by the Prime Minister. That's the very accessible, readable one. And then if you want to get really geeky, you go to the second link there, which is the local transport note, which backs up this. And this is talking about standards of design. It's talking about an approach to walking and cycling to be as accessible as possible. And I suppose in a nutshell, it's moving away from some of the, oh, we'll just paint a bike on the road and then people can cycle there type thing, to, well, ideally you separate walking, cycling and vehicular travel, you know, cars, buses, etc., completely wherever you can. Now that is one thing in a city like Manchester, London or Bristol. It's another thing in a rural area with market towns, etc., like the New Forest. So that's one of our challenges. So this slide really, I won't spend long on. It's basically the context. So it's all the different things which need to factor in. So we've got this climate nature emergency. We've obviously got the pandemic and the influences on people's behaviour, which we've been chatting about today. And also the health inequalities which are coming out of the pandemic. So not only the ones that were there already, but how they've been exacerbated. And perhaps potentially, oh dear, something strange is happening here. We are getting some strange, the gremlins are here, Peter, they're making my screen go funny too. Is that showing all right for everybody?
That's showing fine, yeah.
I had a message saying that it would be in
mine's fine.
Right, okay, great. So yeah, this demand in green space, whether that will continue and to what extent, still to be decided. So this is a key point I wanted to mention. So LC Whips are about utility journeys primarily. So in the forest, we've talked a lot about recreation and leisure, walking and cycling, but LC Whips are really primarily designed as a tool for everyday utility. So getting to the shops, getting to school, getting to work, all those journeys that we might make in a car under 5 miles when we don't need to. Could we walk some of them if they were just a mile? Could we cycle some of them if they were 5 miles, or maybe even further if we had an e-bike? But of course, recreation is important. So this slide just says that the recreation management work, which is going on between a number of different partners, which you'll be aware of, is also aware of this, and we are making sure that whatever happens within the LCWIP, it dovetails nicely with the recreation management approach. So nothing to be worried about in terms of how impacts might be made on the forest, because it will follow the line, if you like, that where we're trying to increase the opportunities around the outskirts of the sensitive areas, and then reduce where we can pressure on the most sensitive spots. So a new forest LCWIP, they're produced over the coming year. The steering group has been formed, and as I mentioned, Hampshire County Council, the lead partner, ourselves, the District Council and Forestry England. But of course, there's lots of other organisations with an interest. So Verderers, Natural England, Wiltshire Council, Test Valley, won't read them all. They will all be involved to various degrees. Some of them already are. We've also reached out to all the parish and town councils at what we call our National Park Quadrant meetings. And as a result, we've got a named person from every single one of those now who will hopefully be attending a workshop towards the end of next week. More of that later. And it's really important that we get that buy-in early before we've really even started looking at maps, so that people are aware of it. And then when a final consultation and version comes out, people recognise some of what's in it, or hopefully all of what's in it, to make it far more likely to happen, I think. The geographical area is the whole of the national park, but also the whole of the district council planning area too. Now that's really important because, as you know, most of the people in the New Forest live in the areas around the outskirts of the national park, in the market towns, etc., etc. So a lot of this work will focus inevitably around getting people short distances around some of those market towns, for example, Ringwood, Lymington, New Milton. But we also want to think about also connectivity between villages and connectivity from the outskirts to relevant places where they need to do things, whether that be, you know, work, other locations, recreation, for example. Just to mention, the Waterside LCWIP is also has also already happened, or at least it already has been through a consultation. So it's already been through a mapping process. So there is a draft version of that which will be released shortly. So the county are releasing that probably in advance of the wider New Forest LCWIP, but they will be integrated over time. So the Waterside was able to go ahead earlier because it accessed some money from something called the Transforming Cities Fund, which is something Southampton City Council have been leading on. So timescale. So the stakeholder engagement and what we call co-creation will happen throughout 2021. Really important, it's an ongoing conversation, and you know, part of today is coming to let you know what's happening. You may hear about this in other areas, so at least now you've had a bit of an initial information, but also how you might want to be involved to a greater extent given your role as the Access Forum. We have the bespoke workshop on the 19th of March, of which we'll be inviting the chair of the Access Forum, who could potentially nominate somebody from the Access Forum to go. So it will be limited to numbers. Greatest would be to have everybody there from the Access Forum, because we've got all these different town and parish representatives, and they're obviously just one of an area. But we'd also like to talk to landowners and estates later on in the summer. But further Access Forum involvement is something which would be my question to you. How would you like to be involved? There's lots of options. We could do a bespoke session, for example, with HCC. And then a spring-summer audit. So Hampshire County Council use Sustrans. So there's a cost to this work which we're sharing, and Sustrans have done this before, so they will be running the workshop next week. They will be doing some of the mapping for us, but we are working very closely with them to ensure that all the sort of different intricacies in the New Forest and the operating environment of the New Forest, if you like, will be taken account of and represented. Excuse me. And then in the autumn, a draft report and formal consultation will take place. So this slide is, I'm well over halfway, you'll be pleased to know. So this slide is cycling and walking considerations. So again, it's early days, but these are the sorts of things which you'll be familiar with, I'm sure, but are being considered and will be considered over the process. So I mentioned towns and connectivities. Obviously, there are busy villages. I mentioned this idea of core routes. So one of the challenges is the geographical scope of the forest. So we need to manage expectation. We're not going to be able to, in this one plan, have a very detailed plan for absolutely everywhere, for everybody who wants to go anywhere by walking or by bike. So there will be prioritization and there will be core routes. And again, just because it's in the plan doesn't mean it can happen quickly. The money then needs to be sourced. But some, we hope, will be smaller things which can happen over time through investment, I don't know, by developer contributions or specific funds or regular budgets where they might allow. But any larger developments and infrastructure will need to be sourced externally via the government funds, but through HCC, etc., etc. It's also worth noting that, of course, at that point there would be full design considerations and planning permissions, etc., etc. So all the necessary consents would need to be sought later. The LCWIP is more about priority and identifying an agreed network which could be put in place in the future. I mentioned obviously walking. We've got the rights of way. We've been chatting about them earlier. So interesting to see, whether you think rights of way are utility. Are people using rights of way just to go to the shops to do things, or are they? I mean, is dog walking a utility activity? That's an interesting question. Maybe one for another time. But that's an important aspect, I think, of the rights of way network, is how it can help people move from cars where suitable, and therefore help with becoming net zero by 2050, because obviously cars, lots of them will move to electric, but we can't all drive electric cars perhaps as much as we drive at the moment. Or at least that's the ambition of the Hampshire County Council transport plan, transport strategy, which was released, the consultation recently, which you may have seen. And then the other thing I'll just pick out here, obviously inclusivity and accessibility, very important. So what is the infrastructure like? What are the design standards like? Are we considering different users? You see a picture there of the pedal project. And also e-bikes, how are they going to shift behavior as they become cheaper, as more and more people use them, and as infrastructure improves? There's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here, really. So until you have lots of people using e-bikes and bikes, then it's difficult to justify the infrastructure. But until you put the infrastructure in, you don't get lots of people using it. So we've seen through the first lockdown that when roads were quieter, there was a big increase, and the weather was good, there was a big increase in walking and cycling. So we know that there is that latent demand there. But e-bikes have been shown in rural areas to be able to shift journeys over 5 miles, because if you're not a regular cyclist, and over a 5-mile cycle is quite an undertaking, because it takes time, it can be quite tiring, whereas shorter cycles people are more likely to take. But with e-bikes, people are more confident, and they think that there may be an opportunity there in the forest for us. So coming to the end here, a better network of walking and cycling routes has long been talked about. We were doing some research and looking at some stuff from 2003, which had a lot of it, which still hadn't been achieved, but fortunately some of it had. But I think it's now time for us to get together as different partners and as a community and as interested organisations to try and crack this master plan, which is what we hope this LCWIP will do. The push for zero carbon by 2050, I think, is helpful. It will mean there'll be greater investment in these things over the time. So we need to be sure that we're there with an LCWIP and with a partnership that can access that. We have our recreation management strategy, we have our 22 actions, we have a strong partnership there. So this, obviously recreation is always a hot topic in the forest and will be for this summer especially, but this is a long-term plan. This won't even be produced until the end of the summer. So we need to take the learning from this pandemic and the impacts that it might have, but also we need to recognise there's a longer game here too. So it will help us manage recreation in the future. And communities really will be crucial. So this is why we're doing so much work talking. So any help you can give by letting people know in your community about the plans as they come, and that would be very much appreciated. So I hope that's made sense. I can always answer any questions you might have. I can do that now, Ruth, or I'm happy to take my part later on in the discussion as you see fit. So thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen. And
thank you. I think some people may have some pressing questions now. Has anybody?
Gordon, Chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Fine. Will there be discussions about the professionally organised and seemingly competitive cycling events in and around the forest?
I don't think that comes into this. I think you might be able to do it in the next cycling thing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about infrastructure, so presumably these companies will be looking at infrastructure and trying to figure that into their plans.
Well, Jim, what did you got to say? I thought you were looking for a short.
It's a good point. I think all these things are linked. I agree, but I wouldn't have thought that that would really be something which would form part of the LCWIP, because it's primarily about individuals using their legs and using their wheels to get around. So it's not so much about infrastructure for events. Now, obviously, if you improve something like, I don't know, the gravel network or a bridle, if you improve a bridleway, it becomes less muddy, you might put gravel down, and then it might start being used by an event organizer. That's a separate thing. But I think, the LCWIP is more about everyday use of for residents and for people who live close to the national park, to enable them to perhaps find it easier not to use their cars, and walk and cycle, with the multiple health benefits that you might have and multiple environmental benefits from that.
No, I agree. It's a very small part of the considerations that you will have to look at. But I just felt that people are aware that some of the events have caused considerable concern. And the more user-friendly you make the paths and the routes around the forest, some people might be tempted to say, oh, that would make a good route for one of our events. So
yeah.
Okay,
just very quickly on that, of course, on any sort of land, then permission would be required. So for example, if people weren't running an event on Forestry England land, they would need permission for that. So any sort of impacts can be covered off that. If you're talking about highway events, so where you have multiple users, for example, cyclists on the highway, that's slightly different. But of course, that infrastructure is already pretty good for cycling, but it's just busy. But yeah, I think I take the point there, but I think that it's more of an issue about the highway itself and the use of that than it would be for off-road.
Yeah, okay, I'll accept that.
Thanks, Gordon.
Peter's got a question as well, Jim.
I'd just like to endorse what Gordon's saying. If we improve the infrastructure of bridleways, the next minute you'll get these cycling so-called, I forget what the term they use, but they end up as races because they're trying to do it against the clock. And if you improve the infrastructure, they'll be on there. It's something to be aware of.
I think we are, but it's the permission thing. If we want people to have journeys not using cars, we're going to have to improve bridleways, and it's a question of permissions. But that will be taken into account, I'm absolutely sure. And has anybody else got any questions?
No, Ruth, no more.
No, I mean, any funding, Jim, is going to have, it's going to take time to get, isn't it? And it'll be mainly from developers, will it? Or the government putting any money in?
Yeah, well, I think there's broadly three forms of funding. There's developer contributions and kind of regular things that might come forward from development. There's opportunities to bid into things that we might have as a protected landscape. Around access and what's called the Farming in Protected Landscapes, FIPL, which is actually coming out now from government right now. There's still details emerging about how access might be one of these public goods, which the subsidies may pay for over time now that we leave in the EU. And then the third one, which is perhaps the biggest opportunity, is central government funding, which Hampshire County Council can look to as the Highways Authority. and there will be opportunities for that, but of course that will be spread very widely across Hampshire. And if you have an LC WIP, then you're in a better place. But again, you know, it's a 10-year plan. There will be a mixture of quite aspirational things in there, I hope, but there will be a mixture of practical, smaller items which may set the context for other things. For example, that bridleway link that does need improving for everyday use. Maybe there's some of the gravel network that could be looked at. So there's multiple benefits, but until we've gone through the process really and worked with you and others to look at what the opportunity is, we don't yet know. But I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of probably we could sit down and draw a pretty good one, but with even taking account of the constraints. But we need to work through the process with the experts like Sustrans and all the local communities, the town and parishes, and try and get to a kind of best case agreed plan by the end of the year, which we can then start to implement over a 10-year period.
Yeah, well, that's quite clear. And Hampshire County Council will be bidding for this money, or will they get a sort of fair share around the country, every county getting it?
I don't know the details on that. As far as I'm aware, it will be bidding because they don't have a lot of money to spend on this. However, there are occasional big road improvements. For example, Hampshire County Council have accessed as I mentioned, the Transforming Cities Fund, which is looking at links into Southampton, and there is money that they've accessed through that, which will enable them to improve routes on the water side. So things like that will happen over time.
Yeah,
I can find that out in more detail.
Sorry, Richard Taylor's got a
yes,
question.
I see Richard had his hand up.
And then Henry Mellor, please.
Richard.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Ruth, and thanks, Jim. I just wanted to say very briefly how very supportive of this entire process I am. That's either from a recreation management point of view, or as the chair of the Cycle Working Group, as a parish quadrant rep, all those processes. And I'm supportive because I think it gives an opportunity for all the organisations in the forest to input into this and actually come up with a plan that we're all prepared to support. That I think this debate that we've just had now shows that there are an incredible variety of opinions on this subject, and we need to bring them all together and have a plan that we can all get behind. For me, that's the really important part of this process, because if we're not all behind it, then I'm afraid we're certainly not going to get any progress. As a personal point of view, I think it's almost inevitable that cycling is going to increase as a means of transport, utility cycling. That's what I'm a strong supporter of, and we need to have a plan that allows that to happen in a way that doesn't cause problems for other people. So just really to say how incredibly supportive of this process I am. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Richard. I think most of us, we look forward to it. Now, somebody else had their hand up. Henry.
Thank you. Jim, I just wanted to ask about the whole process of encouraging cycling in the New Forest and in the district. Is the LC WIP, is it concerned with the impact that it might have on cyclists who may be tempted to actually ride over the forest itself rather than on the paths? It doesn't seem to have been part of the discussion, and it's perhaps a bit vague in the way I'm presenting it. But inevitably, with the increase in numbers of people cycling, which is great. I'm a keen cyclist myself. But there is the impact on the natural environment as well, or potential.
Thanks, Henry. I think probably that's more pertinent to Richard's presentation than it is mine, but just from an LC WIP perspective, as because we're all partners in the same stuff, then the LC WIP it provides a kind of overview of the routes, the core routes, and the possibilities for different market towns to be connected, for different villages to be connected, both by walking and cycling. So it won't go, I doubt it would go into that detail, but then that's where the management steps in. But obviously it needs to take as a constraint, as a key constraint, the highly protected landscape, which is not really a constraint. It's a fantastic thing, isn't it? We have this amazing new forest on our doorstep. We need to look after it. We all agree on that. So I think it's a case of, I think probably best addressed in Richard's presentation, that specific question on cycling on the protected habitats and the gravel network.
Yes, thank you. I think we do leave it there to Richards. Now, we were talking in terms of having a 10-minute break so people could make themselves a cup of coffee, and I would think probably this is the appropriate place. Do you agree, Jim?
Very much so, Ruth, yes.
Yeah,
Ruth,
Richard's quite happy. Yeah.
Sorry, there's Paul's got his hand up as well. I don't know if you want to take that before the break.
Is it appropriate now, Paul, or would it do afterwards?
It's just very quickly, and Jim can answer it at some point. It's just I'm just chucking it out there. Have you looked at the Dutch model of what they're doing out there? What their infrastructure is like?
Yeah. So very quickly, Sustrans use that. There is a specific model, Paul, which they use in their analysis. They use a number of different models called a propensity to cycle. So they look at kind of demographics of an area, the infrastructure, the location of different things, trip generators, if you like. There's all this jargon, and then they will work out, and they will use like a Dutch model or a different model. So yeah, I'm not an expert in that, but Sustrans, that's why they're on board, and obviously they do look at the simple example of the Dutch, which is if you build infrastructure of a high quality, you get lots more people walking and cycling. And they didn't have it in the 70s, but they do now. So it shows that over long term, then that sort of infrastructure reaps a lot of benefits in terms of walking and cycling.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I think, Richard, are you happy if we break there and say at 10:02 we're back with you?
No problem, Ruth. I'll get a cup of coffee myself.
Yeah, and are you going to hang around, Jim?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll hang about.
Well, all right, let everybody get there. So we're back at 10:02 then, promptly. Okay.
Hi, Adam. No sound.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're on.
It's good. Yeah, my computer's been.
Just before we start again, is Gordon Garrett listening? Can he give me his new address? Obviously not.
I think you'll have to email him, Peter. I think if you email him, you should get a response.
Right.
If you actually
Okay.
need his address other than his email.
Well, I've just seen him. I've seen him several times walking down my road, so he's obviously come to live nearby.
We can give you.
To him then, aren't you?
we can ask we can ask Gordon if he's happy for us to pass on his number to you, Peter, or we can pass on his email address. That's readily accessible.
Hello, I've just come back into the room. So yeah, I'm quite happy.
Where are you living, Gordon?
Butts Lane.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yes, you may well see me walking around, and any improvements to the cycling network in our area will be gratefully received. I'm doing a lot of walking to the shops and back. You'll all be pleased to hear. keeping the car off the road.
I've seen you on Roman Road several times.
Yes, well, I'm at that end of Butsash Lane. So yeah.
What number Butsash Lane?
Oh, I don't know if I ought to publish that. It's being recorded.
Oh, okay then. You might near the Glen Eagles.
Quite close to that, yes. In fact, I can see it from where I'm sitting now. But anyway, yeah, Peter, have you not seen the little camera symbol on the row of instructions, or the
Yes, turn camera off.
yeah, that's the one. I just is that I thought that's the one. Yes, you found it. Well done. I know it's a little bit different from the Zoom meetings that I go on, but yeah,
It's a lot different.
Yes, it is,
and it's more difficult too. Zoom's easier than this.
I would tend to agree with you. Yes, yeah.
I have to have about 3 goes to log on to this. It doesn't work first time.
Well, sorry, you carry on with.
Well, no, I think it differs. It's partly on what your broadband connection is at the time. I had, I think sometimes Zoom's difficult, sometimes this is.
Yeah. Yes, and just a very quick discussion on the reapplying for membership of the forum. Yeah, I mean, so I missed what Adam had said. Do I have to get a form and post it in, or is it emailable? Or
you can email it. I think the form is on the website. I mean, I saw there was something about recruitment on the website. Yeah. I don't know whether you've got to copy it across somewhere and send it in, or whether you can do it directly on the website.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just because we're all sorry, I'm here, but I'm having problems with my camera. I have no idea why. So you can. No, this is it. You what? Sorry.
Can we do it just on the website?
Yes.
And send it in?
Yes, you can just email it in. So there's a Word document on the website. So if you just download that document, if you've got a Word on your computer, and then fill it in, and then email it to access.forum. There's our standard email address. It's all on the form, access.forum@newforestmpa.gov.uk. So if you email it in, then myself and Vicky will be processing those, and yeah, we'll probably have some new members. Some of our members are leaving, and you never know. We might get some new members in. So it's it's a fair and open process, basically, Gordon. So if someone comes along, they do a better job than Ruth at representing walkers, then or Anne at commoning, then all these posts are kind of up for grabs, really. So do put in your best application. There are.
Oh, well, I shall do. I mean, I am very interested in remaining on, certainly for the last, we hope, leg of the coastal path.
Yes,
and of course to keep abreast of the developments at Calshot. It's probably a little bit sort of specialised, but yeah, I do take interest in all the other aspects of the forest. But having lived very close to the route of the coastal path and of course the Calshot development, I've taken quite a personal interest in that. So.
Yeah, just bear in mind when you're applying, Gordon, that you're meant to represent either a user group, like a represented party. So saying that you're interested in the coast path or the Forley development might not get you very far on the application.
No, I appreciate that, but as you know, I did represent the equestrian fraternity, and when somebody else came along, it felt as if
the spot is going to be vacant.
It felt as if general recreation was created to.
Well, we need to restart.
To reapply.
I think we need to draw this to a close now and restart the actual forum meeting because the time is up.
Sure.
Okay. we can
I'm
discuss
here, Ruth.
don't over to Richard, really.
Is everyone back?
Well, I don't know, Vicky would be able to see everyone's picture. She's got the
Yeah.
control.
It looks like everyone should be back. So, yep. Go ahead, Richard.
Good. So I guess most of you probably know me, but if just in case you don't, I'll do a brief introduction. My name is Richard Burke. I work for Forestry England. I've been here in the forest for almost 20 years, something like that, working in the land management sector originally, and then in sort of recreation management for Forestry England over the last sort of 7 or 8 years. My current role is the programme manager for the recreation management strategy for Forestry England. So my job is a sort of full-time role really to deliver the actions that come out of the RMS, the recreation management strategy, on sort of Forestry England estate in the New Forest. So I'm involved in the sort of steering group of the RMS, and then in sort of being the architect of our response to that, I guess. And why am I here really? I wanted to sort of just present to you guys, and I've done this with some other stakeholder groups, of what I sort of see as a future vision for what a sustainable off-road cycle network could look like in the forest. So this is a sort of bit of a sort of vision thing really, rather than a plan of what's going to happen. I really want to sort of get it out there just to be able to sort of get the discussion opened up really, and to sort of take some feedback around this subject, because I'm aware that it is a very sort of emotive subject in the forest, and probably, I don't think, for the right reasons really. So but you might not agree with me, but I'll start and I'll go through the presentation. It's a sort of reasonably long presentation, so bear with me. And I guess the best time is for questions at the end. I find it a bit difficult on Teams presenting because you don't get any feedback at all from people's faces. So hopefully I'm not sort of way off the mark, and if I am, someone just please stop. But what this presentation is about really is about trying to put things into context and stimulate some discussion around how we sort of move forward the discussions around the cycle network. You know, I think the key thing for me is that we all want to, you know, do the same thing. We all use the forest for the same reasons. We love the place. We love what it does for us physically and mentally. We love working in it, making a living from it. We might have different views, we might have different experiences, and we've certainly got different starting points, but we all want the same thing, which is essentially to protect the forest. So this isn't about attracting more visitors or turning the forest into a visitor centre, but it's about using tried and tested visitor management concepts to nudge people to the places that are appropriate or more appropriate, and to try and reduce the impact of their visit on the special nature of the New Forest. So I think if we're going to do that, we need a solution that's reasonable, logical. It's got to be sustainable and appropriate for the long term. You know, the current situation where we go to the Verdras every 3 years to ask for permission for the network just doesn't seem to be getting us anywhere really. And you know, I don't think that's a really good long-term solution. So, you know, we need to look at data evidence and ignore the sort of previous rhetoric really, and try and find a better way. So bear with me while I share my screen and I take you through the sort of journey. One second. Just have to bear with me. I've had a bit of a screen sharing moment. A sec. Can people see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine, Richard. Thanks.
So you've got the cover page. Great.
Yes.
Brilliant. So that's me. That's the topic. Let's move on to number 2. So why are we here really? really, you know, why do we need to open the debate? I guess for me, it's pretty clear within the New Forest Recreation Management Strategy, 22 strategic actions, which was sort of, you know, we ended up there as a result of 2 public consultations and a lot of work in the background around that. There are 4 clear references to cycling. You know, and the partner organisations on the steering group, the RMS steering group, which are Forestry England, Natural England, National Park Authority, the Verderers, New Forest District Council, Hampshire County Council and Thames Valley Borough Council are all committed to delivering the actions. And these actions, again, like I say, have the support of the wider public and stakeholder networks in the forest. So in order to do this, we need to address the issue of off-road cycling on the Crown lands. And it's perfect timing, really, with the work that Jim's presented earlier in this meeting around the local cycling walking infrastructure plan. The 2 things, you know, can sort of work together and you know, and probably more than the sum of their parts, if that makes sense. What I wanted to do really to start with is to put things into context a bit, because I'm aware that, you know, from my time here, cycling is a very, very emotive subject and solicits a lot of different views from a lot of different people. And we talk about it an inordinate amount, really. And we've got the luxury of having had a footprint ecology visitor survey in the New Forest in sort of 2018 to 19, which was a result of the planning authorities getting together to find out about, you know, how the forest is used in order to get a better, more strategic way to mitigate against the impact of future developments. Now, the beauty of that scheme is we've got access to all the data from that survey. And I was looking at this a few months ago, and I don't know if everyone can see that. There's a good sort of infographic here, which shows the level of cycling across the visitors to the New Forest in that time frame. And if you can all see the bottom right-hand corner, the yellow block, that yellow block sort of represents the relative number of cyclists compared to all our other visitors. And you'll see from the sort of headline stats on that page that off-road cycling in the New Forest accounts for about 5.4% of our visitors. But I'm pretty sure we talk about it more than about 5.4% of the conversations I have on recreation relate to cycling. Mostly, you know, when you look at the split of that 5.4%, local regular cyclists like myself, that's 0.7%, people who are on holiday, 1.8%, and then sort of local infrequent users, so that's people from around the margins of the New Forest who are coming here infrequently with themselves and their families. They make up 2% of our visitors. So I don't know how anyone sort of, you know, what anyone thinks of that. It'd be interesting to hear a bit of feedback on that at the end of the session, whether that felt like, you know, looked like it felt, if that makes sense, or whether you thought that would be a higher proportion of cyclists here relative to the rest of our visitors. And then when we go on to sort of where cyclists are going, the footprint visitor survey data has been really good, and we got them to investigate people's behaviour at 60 of the Forestry England car parks in the forest over that period of time. And those 4 maps you can see on the screen in front of you are the activities, if you like, of dog walkers, other activities, which is all sorts of other stuff, horse riding included. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, the activity by cyclists. And what you'll see from those maps is that cycling access as it stands in the forest is generally more focused onto a way smaller number of routes than any of the other types of activity. So we do, you know, we hear about cyclists being everywhere, but actually, for the most part, they are more focused on some of those core gravel tracks that already exist. Now, what I haven't done at this stage is map that network onto the cycle network. I suspect a lot of it is sort of access on the cycle network, but with a number of other decent sized gravel track. So I will do that at some point before I sort of go any further with this. But next slide. So who's cycling? You know, we sort of hear all this stuff. We see it in the limited times. Cyclists doing this, cyclists are doing that. Who are these people? They're all of us, aren't they? They're normal people. They're people's mums, people's dads, their families. They're retired people. They're young people. They're people who are coming to the forest to get around the place and get some exercise and fresh air, see the views, take stock of the place for the same reasons that we all do, really. What I'm really trying to sort of understand, and I think we need to sort of fix in some way, is the sort of views that are held locally on the impact of cycling, and the perception of the impact versus the reality of the impact. And I've not got the answers to this at the moment, but I think there's a bit more work needs to be done on that, because we need to sort of, you know, if we want to open this conversation and have sort of sensible grown-up conversation about this sort of topic, we need to look at evidence of impacts rather than just churn out the same rhetoric around cycling that we've sort of heard in the past. You know, what are the impacts of cycling? You know, there's all sorts of things: erosion, disturbance of fauna, interactions with commoning and the working forest, noise and tranquility that are trotted out. And I think we really need to do some work to understand what those impacts actually are, and to put them in the context of the other sort of access, but on foot and on horseback, that is widespread and not necessarily talked about that much. So what are the limitations of the current network? We've sort of ended up with the current network for whatever reason, and it's a bit of a compromise, I think. We call it a network, but it's not really joined up. It doesn't really work as a network. It doesn't very well link the centres of population, so you can't really get to the forest from the water side unless you go on some, you know, you use some fairly miserable public roads. And if you've got kids in bike trailers and you know, young kids on bikes, that's just a real prohibitive sort of experience, really. You know, our network currently encourages people to drive to the middle of the forest with their bikes on the back of their car and to go off on a bike ride from somewhere in the centre of the forest. It's not very family friendly. You know, trying to get from the centre of Lyndhurst village or Burley onto the cycle network through sort of narrow lanes and around places like the Lyndhurst one-way system, you know, they're a real issue if you're not a competent or keen cyclist or an experienced cyclist, or if you have kids or young, you know, youngsters with you. There are a number of points on the cycle network where we've got really dangerous crossings of major roads. So the A35, the A337 are good examples of that. And it also doesn't sort of link that well to some of the major hire centres or the sort of public transport hubs such as stations. And I think another sort of key sort of thing that really sticks out to me is that the network's not logical. It's not logical as to which tracks are allowed to be cycled on and which aren't. And you know, there are some tracks on the network that are nothing more than sort of animal tracks, really, on the open forest that are allowed. And there are wide gravel tracks that we run lorries on that aren't allowed as part of the network. And people just, you know, people can't understand that. If they don't know the background behind the reasons for choosing those, then how can we expect them to sort of understand that? I talked about the physical limitations, the sort of information, the communication sort of limitations, really, that I think we need to do a bit more here. There's a lot of people probably just don't know about the network. I mean, if you just drive into the New Forest from Southampton on a weekend with your bike, you might not even see anything that tells you, a sign or a leaflet or a website that tells you about the network, what it is, why you should use it. I think a lot of local people don't understand it. they probably rode their bikes in the forest when they were kids before the network existed, and might continue to do so today, without understanding that there is a network and that they need to stick to. We've been a bit shy of providing trailhead information, for example. So at our forest centres or visitor hubs off the forests, whenever we've got a bike route or a walking route, we provide a sort of information board which tells you where that goes, why you should use it, what the experience is going to be like, how long it is, and all that type of stuff, to give you the confidence to get on it and not get off it, essentially. And we just don't do that in the forest for whatever reason. People don't understand maps. We produce a map of the cycle network, which is pretty much, apart from the waymarkers, the only thing to help people around the network. And we know from our experience that people just don't understand those maps. Also, our network waymarkers aren't particularly helpful. They sort of work for us, but I don't think they work for the people using the network. Also, the access points to the network are not defined. So, we've got 130 car parks in the Forestry England estate in the New Forest, but some of those access the network in perfect locations, and a lot of those don't access the network at all. And we don't define which do and which don't in a very sensible way. So that's perhaps an issue around information provision as well. And, we don't really tell people that much on site and off site on sort of our media platforms and channels, why you should use it and what are the implications of not using it. So I think there's a bit more work to be done there. So it's sort of a catch-22, really. The network isn't a network. Access in the New Forest isn't analogous to the wider cycle access in the rest of England. You can ride your bike where a horse goes on a bridleway in the rest of the country, but in the New Forest you can't. We provide limited information off-site on our sort of media channels, and we provide limited wayfinding and information on-site. And I don't think the cycle network's a great experience for a lot of its users. But this is the catch-22. We still expect everyone to use it, and there are good reasons for, cycle access being sort of channeled where we want it, and we really complain when they don't. So what do we sort of need going forward to have a truly sort of appropriate and a sustainable cycle network that we can all support? I think we need something that's informed by proper data and insight rather than just by the same old rhetoric and sort of, it's not propaganda, but it's just the same old complaints. We need something that's supported long term by all our stakeholders, and that includes people represented on the Access Forum and people in the sort of the conservation side of our business as well, conservation stakeholders. We need a network that's backed up with good information both off-site before you get here and on-site. That network also needs to have the support of cyclists and cycling groups, so it needs to provide a safe, positive visitor experience, and people need to be able to sort of enjoy themselves while they're using it. It's got to be a true network and connect to the places that people want to go. And we've all got to try and understand and value the sort of people that are coming here to use it. Cyclists and visitors here provide a significant input of cash into the local economy. People are our eyes and ears in the forest. They report a lot of the incidents that we have to respond to. So it's sort of in the right places and the right time. It's good that people are out there. So we need to value what's good about cycling in the forest, but we also need to robustly deal with what's bad or what doesn't work. So having a sort of decent network that we can all sign up to means we're all also signed up to dealing with issues that arise sort of off the network in the future. And that sort of means that, we're being quite reasonable when we need to enforce any off-track activity in the future. So how do we do this? I think the way forward really is to get some better data and insight around cycling, the network, how and why it's used, So where are cyclists going? Why are they going to those places? What is attracting them there? When are they going there? Where do they come from? Where do they live? Where do they travel from? Where do they park? Why do they cycle off track? You know, we need to ask those questions. We need to understand that in order to sort of try and fix it or reduce the impact of it. You know, what are the actual impacts? We need to sort of do some work around that. I mean, how do we get this data and insight? Well, a lot of it's already out there, or it's certainly come to the fore in recent years. I mentioned we've got access to the Footprint Visitor Survey. That's a really powerful bit of information on the use of the forest over the last few years. We've also got data from Strava, a sort of cycling running app that logs people's sort of habits and journeys. So we can look at sort of hotspots and places people are going from that data. We've also got some local teams out engaged in talking to cyclists, chatting to people that they find off the network, you know, gathering information and data from them, you know, face to face. But there's also sort of local social media platforms we can use to do targeted local engagement, online surveys, just to try and get to people using the network and find out a bit more about why they come here, etc. We've also got access through people like the organisations like the Cycle Working Group, like the Access Forum, local bike clubs, bike shops and hire centres, and we can talk to them about what their customers and their members want as well. Bear with me. So what is the way forward? What are the physical things that we need to think about to solve this problem for the sort of long run and make a more appropriate and sustainable network a reality? I think we need a better physical network that links to towns and villages and to other cycle infrastructure. Perhaps it makes more use of more of the gravel track network, the wider sort of vehicle tracks that crisscross the forest. Perhaps it links better to the hire centres and the bike shops. Perhaps it links better to points of interest in the forest. So places like Boulderwood, the Reptile Centre, Anderwood, Blackwater, all those sort of visitor hubs that we have in the forest. You know, at the moment, people are driving between those places, and wouldn't it be better for all of us if people had the confidence and the infrastructure to be able to cycle between those places in the summer? Perhaps it links better to cycle, what I sort of call cycle hub car parks at the periphery. So rather than have to drive into Blackwater in the middle of the forest to get out of your car and on your bike, perhaps we have a cycle hub car park at the edge of the forest that people can come to, may not even be on the Forestry England estate perhaps, and they can get out of their car without bringing their car into the forest and get on their bike. We need a network that's logical and it focuses people onto robust tracks. We need a network that's obvious. It's got obvious, coherent and helpful wayfinding furniture. So the signage that we use to get people around the network needs to work for those people that are using the network rather than just ourselves. We need a safe and intuitive network, so it needs to give people confidence to use it, but it also needs to be really intuitive. So it almost needs to be more difficult to go off the network than it does to stay on the network. And I mean, that's a really difficult one to solve, but you know, I've seen other cycle infrastructure in places where that's been achieved. So it also needs to provide a great visitor experience, so people come back to use it rather than go and find their own way across the forest. And we need to really crack the nut of those safe major road crossings as well. Bear with me. So the information we provide, I said we don't do a very good job of this at the moment. So what do we need in the future? So we need a network that's backed up with a website, an app. You know, that's the way forward these days, I think. Giving people a paper map perhaps isn't always the best way these days. We need to have access points that are clear and easy to find. So we need to perhaps differentiate between those car parks that give you access to the cycle network and those that don't. We need a network that works for the hire centres and for their users and waymarks the routes the hire centres already publish. So those guys are sort of experts in getting their customers around the forest. Why wouldn't we listen to them and try and, you know, piggyback on what works for those folks? We need to provide clear and helpful trailhead information. So telling people who are coming to use the network about the forest, why it's special, and, you know, how they can help us in looking after it and reducing their own impact. We need clearly marked through routes and circular routes that tie in, hopefully, with the work that comes out of the LC WIP, connects villages and towns and visitor attractions. And we also need the network to be patrolled by knowledgeable staff, and perhaps, you know, even cycle volunteers whose sort of core role really is to be on that network, chatting to people who are using it, giving people the confidence to stay on it, questioning people who are veering off it as well. And we need the network to be promoted by you guys, all the stakeholders. So we all need to buy into this and you know, understand the concept and to sort of push that at every opportunity. You know, more than anything really, we need to engage people in understanding why they need to use the network and the impact of them going off on an animal track to a valley mire or through a bird nesting area in the spring. So how do we do it? I think, you know, we can't do it, Forestry England, on our own. So we need to engage with and ask for support from people who are out there, really. Cycle shops, hire businesses, the clubs, cycle initiatives like Pedal, partners that we work with already, volunteers that we have, you know, perhaps a volunteer cycling group that we make better use of keen cyclists to patrol, to inspect the network and to engage with people using the network. You know, we've got access to other local businesses, cafes, places of interest who all, you know, all have a vested interest in tourism and getting people to their destinations efficiently. Transport networks and also the tourism providers such as Go New Forest can help, you know, because they understand their audience and to have a lot of information that we can perhaps use to help our journey. This is sort of a bit of a look into the future really, and I did this as something to interested me, but this is perhaps a bit of a talking point, and this is what the future visitor journey could look like for the cycle network. And you know, none of this is set in stone. It's just really to promote discussion and to get people thinking about where we could go to. And my vision really is that, you know, before you come to the New Forest, you'd go online. You might go to our website, the National Park website, Go New Forest's website, and you'd find a New Forest recreation sort of portal or a place you could download an app about cycling in the New Forest. You might click the cycle link. It might give you a list of the car parks that are near to your home that have access to the cycle network. You might then use the interactive map on that site to plot a route on the network which suited your sort of family's ability, the time you had, or your fitness levels. So you're less likely to have a route that you start to follow that you get bored of, or you get too tired for, or your kids start moaning about halfway round and then you take a shortcut across a protected area. The map could tell you how long it takes, if it's suitable for you. It could tell you what forestry work or if there's a drift going on in that location on that day. It might tell you what car parks are closed, which ones are busy, or even which ones are full in the future. When you sort of come to the forest, you know, that app sort of links in with your sat nav, takes you straight to your start point so you don't go aimlessly driving around the place. At that location, you can see the signage that specifies that you're entering a cycle-friendly car park. It would be a car park on the periphery of the forest with a robust cycle track leading into the forest. And then you'd park your car. You might pay for parking in the future, who knows? Your money that goes into sort of paying for parking could be paying for additional rangers or better infrastructure or conservation enhancements in the future. And then once parked, you take your bike out of the car, You go to the trailhead information point, you check your route on that information point, and you note any other points of interest, places to stop. There might be some New Forest Mark cafes that are highlighted there that you might want to visit. There might be the New Forest Code, and then you'd sort of hopefully read that and understand the importance of sticking to the trails. And then, you know, once you've sort of got your family together, you set off on a well-managed and well-maintained trail that's really intuitive to follow. And it's, like I said before, it's easier to follow it than to deviate from it, really. You know, the tracks and trails it uses need to be clearer to follow and better maintained than the ones that we don't want people to follow. You know, while you're taking that route, you're reassured by regular way markers that make sense to you. They might tell you where you are. They might tell you where you're heading. They might tell you how long it takes to get to that next sort of location. You might even bump into a ranger on a bike who chats to you about the forest, why it's great that you're sticking to the route, helps you sort of, you know, give you a bit of confidence into where you're going again. You might use the network to visit somewhere like Boulderwood. You might use a cafe there in the future that's run by a commoner that's selling New Forest Mark products. You might use the really sort of smart, environmentally friendly toilets. And then you might cycle to the Reptile Centre to see an exhibition about commoning and how it supports ground nesting birds, that type of information provision. And then when you've done all that, you've had a great day, you head back to the car, you're tired, the kids are happy, and you've really sort of learned something and contributed to the place that you've been cycling in the New Forest. And hopefully then, at the end of the day, you leave the New Forest, you go home, you feel that you've engaged with the whole local environment, you've learned more about it, which makes you want to protect it. You've made a donation on the app, perhaps before you go home, and you feel so great about what you've done, this is my utopia, that you tell your friends about why you need to stick to the network. Perhaps that's a step too far, but that's me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Also to the members, just to bear in mind that we are following this with a discussion on cycling, which Mark and Richard, who are both on the cycling working group, are going to chair. But anyhow, questions for Richard and his vision of the future.
So we've got Paul Brockman, Anne Sevier, and then Brian Tarnoff.
Yeah, Paul was first.
Hello, Paul. You're on mute.
Hi, Richard. Nice to see you, mate.
How are you doing?
Two things, really, and one that I think to consider, and I see it quite often when I'm out in the forest, is the impact of rubbish from some cyclists in discarding of plastic bottles and of water or food wrappers and that, and how that's going to be kind of sort of managed, and the impact that creates.
Yeah, well, someone else has mentioned to me about rubbish from cycling, and I don't consider dropping rubbish to be a recreational activity. It's a litter issue, and so we need to deal with litter across any recreational user, really, and also non-recreational users, litter from cars, etc., and bin lorries. So there's a huge amount of work going on through the sort of partners around litter, and we'll continue to keep the effort up on that so that we can try and deal with litter from anybody who's come into the forest. I guess that would be my quick answer.
Yeah, and question two is what I've found is the access to the New Forest, and would love to take my bike from where I live into the forest, but unfortunately with the roads as they are and how busy and dangerous that the roads are, I have to drive in, and you're saying, and I know you touch on this, and I think it would make, if the infrastructure could take on board how our market towns, our routes into the New Forest, which is safe and accessible, so we don't have to use our cars and use up loads of car parking spaces and that.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I think through the LC whip work and you know, future vision for the network, I think it's important that we look to try and find appropriate ways to connect some of those conurbations and market towns around the forest, because if we don't do something, you know, official and appropriate, people are either contributing to the traffic problem or they're finding their own way across the forest from those places, and that's what we really want to try and avoid. You know, there are some decent enough looking links to those places, but there are also people finding their own way without the benefit of the knowledge of the forest that some of us that have worked here for a long time have. So, you know, I think it's important to try and look at it from that point of view, really.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anne?
Yeah, thank you. I just put my hand down. Well, I wasn't really a question. I was just going to say I thought that's an excellent piece of work. I couldn't think of anything that's not been in there. He's obviously, poor Richard has probably listened for God knows how many years to all the various different things. And I think this is a good time to actually try and get something joined up with when we've got doing the LC whip. If this is the opportunity to sort things out. I've got some comments to make when we get to discussion, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Anne. And I think, you know, I've been around a long time on this, thinking about this a lot, and having sort of young kids has focused my mind around some of this stuff as well. And, you know, I just don't think it's sustainable for the long term, the situation we've got at the moment. It's not helping any of us out, really. And like I said at the start, we all want the same thing, really. We want to protect the forest, but we all start from a slightly different place for slightly different reasons, and we need to not take our eye off that. That's a very important thing to remember.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree, because I remember cycling when I was young, and it's a lovely place to cycle because you haven't got any big hills, have you? Just a few odd ones.
Right, we've got 3 more hands up that I can see, but whether this is the appropriate place or whether we hand over and let our 2 cycling reps do it, I don't know. Henry, what was it you wanted to say?
I can't hear Henry.
No, I can't hear a thing. No, you're muted, Henry.
Muted, and so sorry. First of all, thank you very much, Richard, for a very interesting presentation. There were 2 things, and I'll try and be really brief about it. Perhaps they can be expanded in the discussion. One is, for that group of cyclists, mountain bikers in particular, who see mountain biking as a more extreme sport, is there a conversation going about satisfying their needs outside the forest, say in the Green Halo area? The other question, and it's really probably more important, is in our discussion today, we haven't actually mentioned mobility scooter users, and in particular, in the sense that somebody on an electric bike would be would be comparable with a mobility scooter user. And I wonder if there's some way of including that group of people in the discussion. We've got on the rights of way, on foot includes the use of pram, pushchair, wheelchair or mobility vehicle. But we're now sort of focusing on cycling, and whether or not mobility scooter users can be included in that, brought into that category.
Yeah. So on the first point, Henry, there are, you know, the Crown Lands of the New Forest isn't really the place for sort of adventurous off-road cycling.
Absolutely.
And we've sort of maintained that view for a while. We have used Moores Valley Country Park on the western edge of the forest, our visitor centre there, and we've championed and sort of created cycle trails over there, and extreme sort of skills areas that cater more for that sort of off-road technical type cycling. There's also work being done at Avon Tyrrell at the sort of Youth UK site up there, where there are sort of single track routes up there you can go and ride. And also there's some work has been done in Southampton, the Southampton Bike Park, where there's I think sort of near Lordswood there, somewhere in the city, on the sort of western edge of the city. There's quite a good bit of infrastructure there now that's been developed for that more extreme sort of exciting jump sort of type cycling, mountain biking. So these things do exist, and where possible in the past, where we've been pushing the cycle network in our publications such as the Essential Guide, we've also made sure there's a link to Moores Valley in there, right, so that people know that they can go to Moores Valley to sort of have a sort of more extreme experience, I suppose. And we must continue to stock take what's happening in that halo, places like Southampton Bike Park, and get those messages out as well, really. If we're selling the cycle network on a website, I think it's important to put links to those places on that website so that the right people go to the right places at the start, essentially. Does that help? And then the second
yes,
one,
absolutely, it does. But if you were in conversation with somebody, it'd be good to know about these things. You can say, well, actually, you can go here or you can go there.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll try to sort of make sure that happens going forward. The second one about mobility scooters. Well, it is a thing that our network is also very good to use mobility scooters on. So it sort of fulfills that need as well. And Gary North, who you'll know, has spent quite a lot of time over the last number of years making sure that our gates and access points are, where possible, suitable for people who are sort of less able. And we'll continue to do that. There's no reason why we wouldn't.
Yeah, okay. But I think the point was from the point of view of a mobility scooter user. Are they feeling included in the sort of the strategy for better cycling in the New Forest? That's all. Are they in the literature, in the conversation, are they feeling included?
Well, we can make sure that element is considered.
Okay, well, I'll be very grateful for that. Thank you, Richard.
There is some further discussion later. Now, Gordon, is this appropriate for Richard, or will it? You've got your hand up, Gordon, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Hang on a sec. I'll just go face up as well. Yeah. Yes, I think this is relevant to this particular point in time. Looking at the earlier notes that you put up, I may have missed it. But if I haven't, I'll mention it, that there's no reference to integration with other user groups, and particularly on multi-user routes. And this isn't just for your benefit. This is for the other groups as well, who have to consider other user groups. They all have to consider each other. And I give us as an example that the Cadland estate, which was very close to where I live. I've moved, not the Cadland estate. The Hampshire County Council decided that as part of the activity centre at Calshot activities, they would have cycling groups going along the tracks, the tracks on the Cadland estate, and they were going along at fair pace, and my wife and I used to walk daily almost onto the estate, and my wife has a hearing impairment, and bikes were coming up behind her and whistling, but she couldn't hear them coming, and I had to be particularly vigilant to warn her there's a bike coming, because all she had to do was take a half a pace to the left, and she could have been involved in quite a serious accident. So yeah, unless I missed it, I think it would be that other people reading the documents would like to see some consideration of integration with other users on particularly multi-user routes.
Yeah,
So I think that was relevant.
Definitely, and you know, we do already have 100 miles of cycle network in the forest, and which is all used by cyclists, walkers, and horse riders, people with push chairs and mobility scooters, all sorts really, people driving carriages as well. So you know, we manage it reasonably successfully so far, but that's something to consider going forward, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Right. Peter.
Coming. I'm coming. Just clicking the right buttons. Excellent presentation. Just a question of clarification, Richard.
Yeah.
In that, what was it called? Strava maps. You said that the cycling. But is it that the cyclists don't use all the cycle network?
No, so the maps that I showed on the screen, and they're not that easy to show in a virtual way. That was the data from the footprint ecology sort of visitor study. We also have access to the Strava heat maps. So pretty much all the cycle network as is being used. And the point I was trying to make really with that slide is, you know, we all sort of moan about cyclists being everywhere, but when you look at the sort of penetration of cyclists compared to the penetration of walkers and dog walkers, it's nothing like, you know. And for the most part, and I know there will be exceptions to this, so I'm not sort of that naive, but for the most part, most of the cycling takes place on a fairly limited number of routes, and some of those routes, granted, are at the moment off the current network, but I think mostly they're decent tracks. You know, and like I said, there will be exceptions, but you know, when you look at sort of the use of the forest by runners, walkers, dog walkers, and some of the other activities such as horse riding, there's much more penetration from those activities than there is from cycling. Yet all we seem to talk about is the impact of cycling, which just seems, you know, when you look at the figures, it just seems bizarre, really. That was the point I was trying to make, really.
Okay, thank you.
Right, now, Brian had his hand up and did mention before he wanted to say something. Is this the appropriate place, Brian, or wait for?
This might take care of at least half of what I might have to touch on. Essentially, I'll ask the main question that Richard specifically can answer, or hopefully. We recently had a somewhat disheartening correspondence with the off-road advisor from Cycling UK. And one of the claims he made was that there was no restrictive network on the forest, and that the entire forest had a complete right of access for cyclists under the Section 193 of the Law of Property Act 1925. And essentially what I have to ask Richard is does he have any basis on that, or is there an exception that means that the permitted network agreed with the verderers takes precedence over that?
I'm not sure technically, Brian. I'd be useful to see that correspondence if that's possible.
I'm happy to share that with you. There are a few claims, and what's disheartening about it is that he tends to claim that he has nothing to say against any cycling on the forest unless it can be shown very distinctly that it causes more damage than walking and horse riding, which is a bit of whataboutism. And then he also cites the outdated guidance and things like that. It's yes, I'm sorry. I get a little bit upset talking about it because he's so sort of off the charts in his response, and it's not your problem.
Yeah, I mean, share that by all means, but you know, I think the important thing for me really, and the reason I wanted to make this presentation really was just so that we can all sit down, all the relevant parties, and have a sort of grown-up conversation about cycling and cycle access. And, you know, Cycling UK, you know, they may be at one end, you know, some other organisations might be at the other end, but my job normally is to try and find some middle ground that works for everybody. And it's not always easy and it's not always possible, but that's where we want to go. And I think really, you know, the point I'm trying to make through this presentation is that we do need to sort of forget about the past, and we do need to look at the reality and the actual impacts rather than all the sort of rhetoric that's been peddled previously. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to move anything forward, and we're just going to have the same conversation in 25 years' time, and nothing will have changed, you know?
Absolutely, and I should say on a positive note, I do support almost all of your points in your presentation.
Yeah.
Perhaps not the cafe at Boulderwood.
Well, that was just I put that in there to just, you know, just to spark a bit of discussion really around some of these things.
I've also been meaning to send you an email just on how technically you can achieve many of the mapping and computer based app things almost right now.
Right.
It's a project I've been churning away at over the last few
years.
Love
to hear from you on that, Brian, definitely. So fire away, yeah.
The only other thing is just a small note that we might need to revisit data capturing, because while the Strava network and the footprint ecology both have, you know, are very useful sources of information, the footprint ecology slightly selects for those who have driven into the forest and parked with cycling, maybe not people who have cycled in. And Strava, of course, is just limited to those who would actually be, you know, cycling with their mobile phones and using that particular range of apps. It might not capture the people who are more concerned about these sort of off-road adventure-y, you know, mountain bike cyclists quite as well, and that might need another approach to identify where that activity is happening.
I almost see the flip of that, Brian, in that it probably overrepresents the more extreme end of mountain biking, Strava, and it doesn't represent family cycling as well. But one thing that the Strava heat maps have been used for in cities and urban areas is where the sort of councils have got cycle counter data and Strava data. They can then sort of look at those figures and then extrapolate from the Strava data based on using those two elements in other places. So it's logical we could do that in the forest where we've got other data. We could just use both sets to try and build a wider picture. You know, and it's indicative as well, rather than absolute, this stuff, you know?
Yeah. The only other thing, and this probably pertains more to the wider debate, but what is the policy going to be on the speed of e-bikes given the bylaw restrictions on speeds on forest tracks?
So I mean, the legislation around e-bikes is quite clear. You know, e-bikes are electrically assisted bikes. They're not electric motorbikes. That's a whole different thing and something we wouldn't allow on the tracks. And the current UK legislation for e-bikes means the assist element of the electric sort of drive element finishes at 15 miles an hour. So, you know, there's anything other than that, anything over that is done by pedal power alone. So no different than a normal push bike.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Now, Julian Shepherd is here and he had his hand up earlier. He is a ranger in the New Forest. Julian?
Hello, yes. I don't know if you can all see me, but yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I work for Hampshire Countryside Service and responsible for Hampshire County Council sites in the New Forest, including a series of commons on the western edge, Hyde Common and Gawley Common. I totally agree with everything that Richard's presented. Really good presentation and really refreshing to hear that the cycle network is going to be looked at. I just wanted to make the point that one of my sites, Hyde Common, we've got Abbotswell Car Park, which acts as the main starting point for the very popular cycle ride over Hampton Ridge to Fritham.
Yeah.
And so for like a joined up cycle network, I think we need to cross political boundaries, because you've got kind of the unique, well, not necessarily unique there, but the odd situation where the trailhead information will be on Hampshire County Council land, but it's telling people how to behave on Forestry England land. Now, it's kind of a bit out of my job remit who pays for the sign, but it would be good to have the same like infrastructure signage regardless of the land. And I know there's examples where there's National Trust land, similar thing where you'd have signage on National Trust land, but it's telling people how to behave on Forestry England land. So I just wanted to make the point that it will be really good if the different organisations work together.
Yeah, well, you'll be pleased to know that the driving force of the recreation management strategy steering group consists of all those sort of key statutory organisations in the forest, including Hampshire County Council. The advisory group includes other sort of stakeholders and landowners such as the National Trust. So, we collaborate, all of us, in many ways on getting the messages out in the New Forest around recreation management, behavioural messages, dog walking codes, all that type of stuff. So it's been done before, the precedent's set, we're all used to working together. There's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't work together on this stuff going forward.
Okay, thank you.
That's really good news, isn't it? And Richard, you've got quite a lot of support here from us. Now, does Jim want to add anything now? I don't know whether he's still here.
No, I've been listening intently, but I don't have anything to ask
No,
or answer. No.
I think the time has come now really to move on to the discussion led by our two cycling reps, Mark, who is the cycling rep on the forum, and we've also got Richard, who is our national park rep, who is chairman of the cycling group, and they've agreed to lead a discussion. And they have given me some clear, what they're going to cover in two groups. So I don't know who's going to take the lead. Mark, are you going to?
Yes, I'm happy to take the lead. First of all, I'd like to thank Richard for that presentation. I think that's probably covered off the two questions, actually, and most of the answers we're looking for. So if we achieve half of that, then we're definitely on the right road to making cycling more acceptable and safer within the New Forest. I'll start off by just saying my view on cyclists. I believe cyclists are regarded as the white van man of the New Forest. And you should consider that not all white van men are bad drivers. It's just a few. Unfortunately, those few are the people that give the negative image to cycling and also to white van drivers. But those people really are like that in life in general. In all aspects of their life, they're probably bad-mannered, have no consideration and respect and lack of respect for society in general. They're not the sort of people that read codes of conduct and abide by them. So I'll just make that point to start with. With regards to the LC Whip presentation from Jim, again, thanks for that, was good. The 2 points from there was utility and recreation, is the focus of the LC Whip. And I do believe that connecting the settlements in the New Forest will fulfill both of those. It will allow people to cycle between settlements for work, but also recreation-wise, it will give people the opportunity to use their bikes when they're in the forest and not have to use their cars to get anywhere. And in regards to the core routes, with regards to development, there is no, we don't need much development on the routes in the New Forest. What we just need to do is connect them. And the biggest hurdle to that, I think, is getting the consents and from the landowners and the permission to sort of connect those activities. The routes are already there; they just need to be established officially. So the first question that me and Richard came up with, I'll just get my. Can you see that?
We can't see the actual question. We can see that you've got 2 questions, but not what they are.
Okay, we'll try that again.
If you can't get it, just read it out to us. Mark.
Yeah, okay, I'll just read it out, it'll be easier, quicker. Yes, the first question we came up with.
Get rid of that.
Was basically, would a better connected, signed and mapped network improve management of cycling in the New Forest? And I'd just like to start off the discussion on this question. My view is humans are inherently lazy. If we improve the connectivity and signage and with the stakeholders agreement, we could actually channel cyclists in the New Forest and get them to travel where we want them to travel. People will, if the signage is good, people will follow that signage. And that way, we can channel them into the areas or away from the areas where we don't want them to be. So that's open to the forum now for a discussion.
I think you're dead right, Mark. Absolutely the way we need to go.
Right, no other questions.
Okay.
I think there are questions. Sorry to butt in. I think Mark, if you stop sharing your screen, it will be potentially easier for Vicky and others to see that people do have questions. Brilliant.
Can you see everyone that has questions there, Ruth, or do you want me to read them out?
No, there's absolutely no hand ups that I can see.
Okay, so we've got Henry first, then Anne, and then Ross.
Right, Henry.
Unmute myself. Thank you very much. It's almost, I've always got something to say, and that's not the reason why my hand is up. It's probably a mistake, but I just have one question, and it's related to what I was talking about earlier when in response to Richard, and that is about people with additional access needs. In particular, I suppose what's uppermost in my mind is mobility scooter users, and in the signage, the literature, the apps, and the maps, that people with additional access needs are included, and that relates to cycling, not just to pedal, but also to mobility scooter users who, in I think in a very real sense, are comparable with cyclists using the forest.
Yeah, Henry, I think we've discussed before that the mobility users want a bit more information about things like gradients and the actual surfaces, which adds to what has to be produced.
Yes, the majority of the majority, and this is just based on sort of a common sense and awareness of the cycle tracks in the forest and the forestry tracks, wouldn't present a problem for mobility scooter users, and they are. There may be areas that would present a problem. But also mobility scooter users are, like anybody else, well able to judge what is safe and what is not.
Okay, so really we've got this in hand then. So shall we move on?
It really is essentially about inclusion in or people with access needs feeling included, and when we're thinking about cycling and focusing on cycling, that mobility scooter users are taken into consideration. That's really, I don't want to bang on about it. But that's,
Okay, really the discussion now is on cycling particularly. So Anne?
Ruth.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth, for that. Obviously, if you go to any nature reserve, if you go to anywhere where is beautiful views, you have signage. I know there is issues about having signage on the open forest, but you can always stick it in the right place and not take up any sort of grazing or whatever. So I always have been in favour, and I think it's also important that the Forestry England, where you go into woodlands, actually have signage, because the forest is more of a nature reserve. We have thousands and thousands of rare species here, which people don't know about, probably don't care about, but we have a responsibility, I feel, to make sure that it's still here in 100 years' time for everybody to enjoy. So I am all in favour of signage. But the signage, I think, at trailheads should contain other bits of information as well about keeping a dog under control, and so that people get educated. Because we sit here and we talk about education, we must educate people. And that's where I think the signage will come in very handy, very much in favour of it. Thank you.
Richard, do you want to add to that? You're our co-leader on this.
I know I'm co-leader, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're in some kind of order. I would completely back up what Anne is saying, and I think in terms of Richard's presentation, which I think was excellent, we can't expect people to obey networks and rules and things unless we actually give them the information as to what the networks and the rules are. We've got to have signs out there, and we've got to have online systems that people can use. So I think the website and the app and the GPS navigation is incredibly important on this. I put myself through a mine process at Andrews Mayor car park when a couple of cyclists headed off from there recently, which they shouldn't be doing. And I thought, well, how on earth would they know that they are not supposed to be doing that? It's a perfectly valid car park. It's got a nice big gravel track leading away from it. And it's very difficult to come up with an answer. So I just think the information that we need to provide is incredibly important. And I would back up what Richard said about Strava, that Strava, if anything, tends to be mammal country. It tends to be that people who want to show off how far they've cycled and how fast. So it tends to be that your man in will have the Strava information. I heard a presentation from a chap from Leeds University who was saying that they had problems with Strava data because it overrepresented mammal man a little bit. Just quickly, Brian, if you could let me know that information you've had from Cycling UK, I'd be very interested to see that. We have a cycle working group coming up in just over a week's time, and I'm hoping that with this presentation and feedback from the Access Forum, we'll have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. So I'll be quiet for now.
Okay. Well, do we want to go on to the next question, which I think was primarily to do with safety, and I think we are all concerned. So is Mark going to...
Ruth, sorry, I see that Ross has her hand up as well. I'm not sure if she wanted to.
Ross?
It's okay. I just going across unmuting everything. Super presentations. Thank you. One of the points that I wanted to raise, which goes with this question, is that I live quite close to the New Forest Showground, which had the large pop-up campsite last summer, and so met a lot of cyclists around that area and had some really interesting conversations. I learned a lot. One of those issues were the apps from where I'll call them users have been to the place before, and there are apps on the social network which they then download and carry on going the wrong way. So I stopped a group of about 4 families all together, one big group, heading straight off out of New Park, straight across the forest, because they had an app which they kindly showed me, which showed them how to link the campsite up with the cycle track going up to Lyndhurst. And this came up again and again when I chatted to people, because they were going past our house, and you know, similar things. They would got apps from people. So there's this issue, and I certainly think what Rich has just said about the campsite and car parks and Andrews May is a real point, and it could be quite a quick win, I think, if people actually knew that this is a cycling car park and this one isn't. But by telling them this one isn't, they are then pointed to those which are. So it's not just a negative thing. And I suppose my comment is, I think there could be, I don't underestimate how difficult this is going to be, but there are certain aspects of your presentation and discussions, which I think actually, why are we not doing this now, particularly this summer coming ahead? We know we're going to be absolutely inundated again. There could be some quick wins, I think. That's me.
Yeah, thank you, Ross. I think we all understand that, and that is a major problem. Mark or Richard want to say anything?
I completely agree with that. There are things within this that we can do now, and I think we need to think very hard about the stuff that we can do now, stuff that is applicable in what is likely to be a very unusual year, but which would also be incredibly valuable going further forward. I think the provision of information is something that if you're doing it online, you can be flexible with this. Why aren't we doing it now? We should be getting our heads together and getting this sorted. And I think the cycle hire businesses, the various cycling clubs, are an incredibly important means of getting to the cycling fraternity and telling them that this is where they should be looking for their information. It's sad that there's an app out there that's pointing people in the wrong direction, and we don't have anything that's putting them in the right direction. Just as an aside, I looked at an Ordnance Survey map the other day online, and that had a cycle through a very interesting place. So there are many organisations with bad information.
Richard Burke wants to add something.
Yeah, I mean, just on the sort of preparing for this summer, there is a lot of work being done by, Forestry England, National Park, New Forest District Council, on dealing with the inevitable sort of increase in numbers of people that will come here post the end of lockdown. So just to reassure everyone that that work is taking place, and you'll see some details in Gary's report, I think, from that. But and I think cycling. I think probably some of the other issues around fires and pony bothering and dogs are probably worse and bigger risks for us to deal with than cycling in the wrong place, perhaps this summer. So I think going on to the app thing, this has been raised a number of times over the last few years, and there are some apps where you can record your route and then publish it as an open route. And I know we've been in communication with the OS Ordnance Survey on this in the past. The Ordnance Survey app is really good, and Gary North has spent a lot of time with them on logging our cycle network with them, so that if you use the Ordnance Survey app to guide you between Brockenhurst and Lyndhurst, for example, if you choose cycle, it will only route you on the cycle network. It won't allow you to choose a route that doesn't take you across the cycle network. But of course, that's not the only app, and we don't always, we just can't control all that stuff really. It's no different than all the guidebooks that were written in the sort of 80s and 90s that told people to go on X walk or X cycle, that didn't go across our desk prior to that. So it's not a new thing, but we do take action where we can, but it's not always reasonable and easy to do that.
Right, I think we do appreciate that is difficult. Shall we go on to the safety issues, and then we can still come back and say more? We may find there's some links. So who's doing this, Mark or Richard?
Yeah, I'm happy to go again. Cycling as an activity is in the ascendancy, and with that we're seeing more family groups out and about, and obviously new cyclists. So the question is, how can we improve the safety of cyclists in the New Forest? That's family groups, new cyclists, and even for more experienced riders too.
So comments from people. Anne.
Thank you, Ruth. I had been giving this a lot of thought because I've got a couple of heads on here. I wear different hats, as you know. I live up in the north. A lot of people were coming out with their families from Fordingbridge up the Stockton Road to go across Hampton Ridge, super cycle route. If you go off there, you can't get back on it. You know, it's a brilliant route across there. But the first part of their route was a 40-mile-an-hour speed road, which is, you couldn't, you know, it's ridiculous. So I think also the cyclists in the summer, when they come out of Sandy Balls, they come along the B3078 on a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit before they turn into Blissford to access the forest. So I think we need, under the LC Whip, to look at extending the speed limits onto some of the narrow roads. So that is one thing I think we definitely need to do. If it says 30, you just hope people keep to 30. I'm also a great advocate of things which you would call shared route signage. Round the parish here at Hyde, we put up a couple of signs which actually indicates that the roads you will find walkers, horse riders and cyclists along our roads within the parish. So I think having a sign up to say it's a shared route makes people perhaps more aware of other people on the road, because that can be an issue when people are, I won't say it all the time, when cyclists who are going too fast shoot past horse riders. So I think that's a couple, I know, terribly sorry, but you do get the plonkers, the stupid ones who've got no brains, who've got their head down and their bum up. Sorry, cyclists, but you know the ones I mean. Not the lovely families, not the lovely families that are going along and looking at the scenery and stopping and looking at the ponies and the donkeys and having a lovely day out. And I like to see them. As a commoner, it slows the traffic down, you know. It's good for our livestock if they slow the traffic down. Yeah. But basically, I think that's your main issue when it comes to safety. One other thing as well is perception of shared routes and making sure the road network in places is more user-friendly by reducing the speed limits if possible. The other thing I have to bring up, just recently out on the forest, we had a mountain biker come down off of Godsill cricket pitch straight at two riders, went up in the air, nearly hit the riders. One of the horses spooked and the rider came off and got injured. So I'm not just using that as an example, but people have to realise if they do share a route with walkers, with horse riders, with dog walkers, that it is, how can we get over the necessarily need to respect each other? It is, you know, not only just respect the forest, but to respect each other. It's just, you ask for safety, you've got it. There you go. Good. Hopefully that'll get a good start talking. I'm shutting up now.
I know there's some other hands up, but Richard, is it something you want to respond to?
Just quickly to Anne, I know that Cycling UK have done a sort of national campaign, and they work quite closely with the British Horse Society, because obviously this sort of shared bridleway issue, this comes up a lot, and I think it was called Be Nice, Say Hi or something, and it's all around getting equestrian users and cyclists to just understand each other's sort of needs and motivations, really. And it's a really worthwhile scheme, and nothing that couldn't be rolled out or publicised more locally.
Okay, well, Ross Mitchell's had her hand up along with Richard Taylor's had it herself, Ross, and then Richard. Not there. Ross. Well, Richard Taylor. Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm there. Sorry, I'm more of a Zoom girl. Sorry. No, this is me as a horse rider speaking, really, in this, and the issue around families. I have a beautiful old 29-year-old boy who I take literally almost for a dog walk out. He loves it and he is brilliant. Last year, I had about a 3-year-old cycle under him. Families get very excited when they see horses, and the parents just don't understand them. and but that's the first time I had one go under me, but that has been close a lot of times before now. It's not just the cyclists in the club, it's about everybody understanding about animals. And I think that's one of the issues that I would sort of like to raise there, is people are so removed from animals generally now, be dogs and cats, but they just don't understand that the horse flight and, sorry, I'll get it right, they'll run away from it, and you've got a huge animal, and I could have easily, well, that could have been a dead child really, but the family thought it was great fun. I was absolutely terrified that he would move, but the family thought it was great fun. And isn't he gorgeous? Oh, you must be so proud of him. Yeah, so I think there is something about not just the speedy cyclist, but families generally, anybody going on a bike, understanding about sharing. Nobody's going to get hurt by a little kid running into them sort of thing on a bike or wobbling around or whatever. But it's that relationship with other users that worries me. And I'd just like to say, I would love all the roads to have a lower speed limit on, including the ones that allow 60s, because, I think that's the only way we're ever going to make it safer for other users. So here, I'd have them all down at 20 miles an hour. But I don't go to work anymore, so.
Makes a difference. Nobody's mentioned carriage drivers, but there are carriage drivers out there as well. Who are threatened, I guess. Anyhow, Richard Taylor, then, you've taken your hand down, but you still want to talk? No, you're not so sure. And Sevier wants to.
I do, if I can actually unmute. It didn't seem to be working there. I'd just like to say how incredibly important I think the message for mixed user network is, and that I will agree completely with Anne. There are bad cyclists, there are bad walkers, there are bad dog walkers, there are bad horse riders, and I think sometimes we are all those bad users. I know I am sometimes. Sometimes I'm the nicest guy in the world, other times I'm not. So if we can get some messaging out there that people can be more considerate in general, that is absolutely fantastic. That applies at any time. So 100% behind that. Really important.
Ruth, sorry to interrupt. I can also see that Heather has her hand up.
We'll have Anne first. She's had hers up, and then we'll go to Heather.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm always a little bit of a lateral thinker. Who've got used to me. Why don't we have a competition for a strap line for joint using of the forest? That would be, I'm sure we probably could think of one ourselves, but I'm just thinking about it's good publicity, and it's also a way of actually getting some sort of wording out. And we also had some years ago competitions where the schools put signs up in the they had a competition to put signs up in the forest about speeding and animals. So just a bit of lateral thinking. I'm always for that. Thank you.
Okay, well, it does involve other groups. It would need considerable considerations, but we can think about it. Heather?
Yes, well, largely the same thing in some ways. I think what Anne and Richard have said is so important. And it isn't just cyclists and horse riders, it's dog walkers as well. Sometimes get on the wrong side, sometimes do the wrong thing. And it is a question of all the recreational activities having respect for one another, and how we can go about achieving this, because we have a dogs forum, there's a cycling forum, there's an equine forum, and each of these forums hears about, well, the dogs forum will hear about how awful the cyclists are and how bad the equine people are. And I'm sure it's exactly the same in the other places. But we need to work together, because it's a few really bad ones give the whole lot a bad name. And most of the recreational people do it well and with thought and consideration for others. So it's just, how can we extend this? Find a way of doing it, maybe.
we do need more joined up thinking, don't we? Whether this is something that can be tackled through the recreation management strategy. Now, the only one here who's in a high up position on that is Richard Burke. Is there something that the RMS can take forward?
Well, I think if you look at the very first strategic action in the RMS list of 22 actions, something that came through loud and clear from the public consultations and stakeholder consultations, was about sort of doing more to tell people about stuff, to tell people about the special nature of the New Forest, you know, what you can do, what you can't do. And I guess this sort of broadly falls into that, really. You know, it's about us all understanding each other's motivations and our sort of constraints and opportunities as different user groups, and trying to sort of work together to make the place better for all. And that I guess that's sort of fundamental part of the whole spirit of the RMS, really. So no reason why it couldn't be championed through that in some way.
Well, maybe you'll bring it up at your next strategy meeting.
Happy to do that. I'm happy to do that, yeah.
So over to Heather again.
Yeah, that sounds to me like a really good idea, because then if it comes up at the meeting, it might then get talked about through the RMS advisory group as well, which is another forum just to talk about these things and find ways of making improvements.
Yeah, we do need more joined up thinking, don't we? And yes, we do need signage, which is something that's been blocked very frequently. And there are a number of us on the RMS advisory group who could speak on that. Richard Taylor will hopefully help take that forward.
I will take that in hand. Thank you, Ruth. I know when I'm being told to do something.
Oh, don't you think it would be a good idea? You can say that the LAF asked you to.
I think it's an excellent idea. I think the role of signage is something which has been underplayed in the forest. Signs are and sometimes people spend far too much time trying to make a sign look pretty, and it doesn't actually tell you anything. So, you know, there's a compromise to be had there, but yeah. I shouldn't say that, should I?
Well, we all know the problems. Okay, anybody else then?
Could I ask one other question, Ruth, which would be just if Jim is still around on safety issues, how does the LC WIP work in terms of key safety issues? It just seemed to me an interesting area.
That's a good question, which I don't know the definitive answer to, but I do know that the LC WIP will take into account design and obviously the gear change document I mentioned earlier. But because of the next stage, when you actually then start doing infrastructure, then you will then need to take into design, you'll need to take into constraints, permissions, planning permission, you know, SSI status, if you're close to the Crown land or the SSIs, you know, a whole multiple different accessibility, and safety is a key part of that. So in the gear change document, which is what's driving infrastructure standards, safety is obviously an integral part of that. So I think there is some information there to build on, and it will obviously take that into account. But specific interventions to the level of exactly how they might look or what they might, you know, do for safety or for design will come later, I'm imagining. Otherwise, it would be a very, very long document if it was going to go into detail on every single route and proposal or walking zone, etc., etc. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But it's there. It's a huge part of it. But I doubt we'll get specific location-based health and safety stuff from the LC WIP. That will be the next stage once it starts to be implemented.
Okay, that makes absolute sense. General, not specific.
So what about Jim and Richard and the two leaders in the discussion? Is there any other way we can coordinate things rather better? There's lots of people taking their own actions, aren't there? Little groups all acting or trying.
Well, I can try and answer that one. I would hope that today is an example of joined up thinking. So, for example, the presentation that I had referred to Richard's partnership with and Forestry England's work in the RMS. it also referred to join up of the Forestry England being part of the LC WIP process. So just from that example, we are trying to do that by coming here today and having a joined up cycling and walking plan conversation, and mainly cycling plan. So I would hope to reassure you that that is happening, and your input today is really valuable. So what you've been saying today about feeding Access Forum views back to some of these groups via the multiple different ways that you have, because you all probably sit on more than one group. So how you then share that back to other groups and we continue that spirit of join up is really important. But from the National Park Authority's point of view, we have a partnership plan in development at the moment, and that is specifically, we lead that, but that is a partnership plan. So in the title, it says what it does on the tin. It will be about joint endeavour, it will be about join up. So, you know, speaking from the National Park Authority's point of view, that's what we want to see, and that's what we put a lot of time into doing through the quadrants, through access support, the Access Forum, through multiple different ways, trying to engender partnership and get good join up for what's best for the forest.
No, Jim, I appreciate that, and I know you are doing it. It's just that whether we can do anything else to help.
Well, we can always do. I mean, I didn't mean by any means that we were doing it perfectly. There's always room for improvement, but that is the intention, to be joined up and to be working in partnership. So your help in that is hugely appreciated, because we're you know, the expertise of the group here you know so much about the forest, you know so much about your areas of interest. So it's great to hear your thoughts at this forum, but then also how that can input into the partnership plan, into the LC WIP, into, you know, future recreation management actions, etc., etc.
If I could butt in. Sorry, my Microsoft Teams doesn't let me put my hand up, so apologies if I'm being rude all the time. I would sort of for the Access Forum, one of Jim's comments, we might have lots of things have been discussed in these debates. One thing Jim did ask is what the best mechanism for the Access Forum to feed back into the LC WIP process would be. So we've had a really fantastic discussion today about walking and cycling, predominantly cycling, which has been really excellent. And we've really talked about general topics, which is what we wanted to do. But I would ask the forum to give Jim some feedback as to how we can be part of this process. So if we want Jim to do a bespoke session, or whether we want for everyone, whether we want to form a little subgroup, that will be a good thing for the forum to discuss, and then let Jim know how we can feedback on the LC WIP process. Thank you.
I think probably the entire forum are interested in this. Otherwise, it is the cycling people. I don't know I don't know how long Mark is going to stay on the forum. He has indicated that Mark Cowling may actually be moving away. I don't know. Anyhow, Richard Taylor is chairman of the cycling working group. Is it good for us to feed it into them and Jim, or do we just leave and for the moment think about it and email into Adam with suggestions?
I think you need a way to feed the Access Forum views into the LC WIP process. I think that's what Adam's asking for, and it really needs to come from the Access group. The Cycle Working Group will have a separate process completely.
So we'll do it through Adam then, yes? Anne said who's been trying to talk. She's on lots of other groups, so.
Thank you, Ruth. But yeah, I think everybody on the Access Forum must pull their finger out and get involved in this, because this is what it's all about. That's my point. I was going to follow up with that one. The other thing I'm going to throw in, because we're in discussion period still, is we're talking about all these important positive steps that we're going to make, which will obviously capture the majority of the people using the forest. And obviously the elephant in the room is, how do you then take a grip on the people that you catch doing the wrong thing in the forest, and how good are the bylaws, who's going to fine them? And this is going to come at some point, and this is the thing that nobody wants to touch. But I just thought we ought to make sure we don't forget that we need to use the carrot and the stick. I believe in lots and lots and lots of carrots, but don't feed them to the ponies, because we recently had one die because some twat tried to feed a carrot to a pony. But we also need a bit of a stick as well. Thank you very much, Ruth.
Yes, I think we all know that. So we've got still got more hands up. I don't know whether Richard Burke's was a response to Anne, was it?
Yeah, it was. And just to say to Anne, she may well be aware of this already, but one of the other sort of actions through the RMS programme was around enforcement or managing inappropriate behaviour. So there is some work being done across the partners on that, and also internally within Forestry England. So we're looking at providing our staff with better sort of guidelines and information on how to enforce. And, we've done a sort of really good sift of all the different types of legislation that's out there that can be used to deal with some of the sort of difficult issues, if you like, that we tend to face across the summer. So that piece of work is ongoing as well, Anne, and will hopefully yield some decent results. It's not easy, and there are no sort of golden eggs or really easy sort of wins, but we've been through everything, or we're going through everything, and with the support of our partners are trying to find smart solutions to deal with some of those issues, to use the stick more effectively.
I think in this case, I'm just going to say, you are going to be asked that question: what are you going to do about the naughty people?
Yeah.
And you do need to have, I think, a ready reply. That's all. Thank you.
That's all right.
Okay. I wonder whether we should, I don't speak to Gary North if he's still here. He was having internet connection, so I don't know whether he is, but he has got some responsibilities on these routes. So you're still there, Gary? We've probably lost him. His internet was going down. Oh yes, Gary, do you want to say anything? Because you've done a lot of these routes and you're very experienced in this.
Well, no, I mean, I suppose I suppose that's what Richard's here for in terms of the RMS stuff.
Yeah.
It's I suppose since Richard sort of come into this role, I've
taken a back seat, have you?
Well, it's just I suppose it's the RMS. I mean, I suppose the RMS in general is as Richard said, is probably like the golden egg, the way to kind of crack a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about all the time. We've been on this, forums existed, all these discussions we've had over the years, and and I'm just listening to what everyone's saying, really, and Richard and I will have conversations afterwards. But I mean, I suppose it is, I suppose some of the key things, just to reiterate, are, it's great that we've got so many different personalities and people from different backgrounds and that experience and knowledge on this forum, and these people us are parts of other forums as well, and it is we are having those conversations now, and and that in itself is a massive kind of like step forward in progress.
Good, thanks. And Peter's had his hand up for a little while.
Hello, yes, back on again. It was a point for Jim, really. He talked about cycling on this LC whip. If he's requires somebody from the Ramblers and looking after walking, I'd be happy to do so. But if he feels that walking is adequately represented on the LC whip, so be it.
I think that's for that group to decide later on, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a contact for the Ramblers who we're inviting to the workshop on the 19th. So there is some involvement. Is it Chris Frost? Chris Frost?
Oh, okay, yes, yeah, that's fine.
But
It's
again,
in
you know, there's a variety of different walking interests
Yeah.
across the forest, so there won't be one bite of the cherry at this. There'll be several opportunities. So Adam and I will talk afterwards around what we could offer again back to yourselves based on the feedback you've been giving us to ensure that you get the opportunity. I mean, you don't have to take it, but you get the opportunity as much as possible, as Anne was saying, to get as many different views, because it is, you know, it's an open process. And it may be that HCC, I'll find out from them, have a website as well, which will be completely open to anyone. I'm hoping so, that anybody, you know, resident, interested person can access information and put their views straight into the mix. So I'm hoping that will happen too.
That's right. And
Just one other quick point. Just one other quick point is that the coastal path, the route as proposed, is not the end of the story. It will be possible in future to improve it if necessary. And so this could be, you know, the LC WIP, you're talking about a 10-year time frame. It could be something to include in your 10-year look ahead is to improve the coastal path.
Well, wait till it's established, first of all. You might be looking at cycling on parts of it, but I think for the moment we'll park that one. I think Jim's got enough to do without tackling that as well. But
well,